For members of the public, can I draw your attention to the fire regulations behind me on the screen there, and also ask you to keep your phones turned off or turned to silent. And for members of the committee, please use your microphones, as I didn't a moment ago. And okay, we can now move on then. I think last time we have asked the officers to say who they are. Perhaps could officers say who they are, please?
Good evening, members. My name's Lewis Jones. I'm a planning solicitor.
Good evening, members. I'm Beth Howland-Smith. I'm the development manager.
Good evening, members. Patrick Arthurs, Major Sites.
Catherine Pearson, the area team leader.
Chris Berry, interim head of planning and economic development.
Emma Dearsley, Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you.
I'll be going.
Okay. Yes.
Other members will be presenting tonight.
Chris French, area team leader.
Philippa Staden, senior planning officer.
Kate Edwards, principal planning officer.
Jessica Robinson, Senior Planning Officer.
Thank you. So we'll move on to item 1 then. Can I ask the committee to confirm that I should sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 25th September? Great. So I'll do that after the meeting. Emma, are there any apologies?
Yes, we've got apologies from Councillor Val Henry. There are no substitutes.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Emma, are there any declarations of interest?
Yeah, prior to the meeting, we've had interest from Councillor Paul Follows, non-pecuniary, because his capacity as Deputy Leader, he has met with a number of residents in the presence of officers to discuss the wider context of this application. He has received multiple emails and letters from residents and from representatives of the applicant and their agents. He has met with planning officers on a number of occasions in regards to the planning process for this application, and he believes none of these prevent him from taking part in the debate and voting. I've also had from yourself, Chairman, a non-pecuniary in item A1 because of your role on the Cranleigh Planning Committee that is of sufficient weight that could be a perception that you wouldn't consider the application with an open mind, and you will be leaving the meeting for this item and Councillor Beeman will be taking the chair. I believe that Councillor Townsend also has an interest. Thank you.
Thank you. I would just like to confirm that I am Chairman of Cranleigh Parish Council. However, I'm not on the Planning Committee, and the Planning Committee has delegated authority without referral back to full council to respond to planning applications. As with Councillor Follows, I have met with members of the Cranleigh community with an officer present to hear comments, general comments on this application. However, I don't think that this fetters my ability to consider this application this evening. Thank you.
I was going to clarify that.
I should have said, yeah,
yes.
first application.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I need to say another one as well. I'm terribly sorry. A school application, which is also on the agenda. I just think I should say that that application, the site is in the Cranleigh neighbourhood plan. Thank you.
Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, Chairman. I am not a member of the JPC, but I have asked to address the committee on 2 applications that are on the agenda this evening. The first one is item 6.1, application WA 2018-1966. I would like to declare that I was a Cranleigh Parish Councillor at the time that CVHT was formed, and I supported in principle the expectation to replace the Cranleigh Village Hospital, and I was also party to the exchange of the land that forms this site. I do not have a pecuniary interest or a non-pecuniary interest or a predisposition to the outcome of the application before you this evening. I would also need to declare, with reference to item 6.2, Cranleigh C of E primary, upper school and lower school, I should declare that I was, for some years, a governor of the school, but resigned prior to the application being developed, which was started many years ago. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other declaration of interest? No. Okay. Move on then. Item 4. Are there any questions that have been received from members of the public?
None received.
Item 5. Are there any questions that have been received from members? Sorry, from members of the council?
None received.
Item 6. Beth, I'm asked to ask you whether there are any updates to government guidance.
No, Chairman, there aren't any. Thank you.
Okay, so move on to 6.1. So I'll declare an interest in leaving.
Okay, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Let me introduce myself first. I'm David Beeman. I'm a Farnham resident councillor representing Farnham Castle Ward. So that's who I am. To make it quite clear, so the rest of the introductions, really. Right, the item is WA 2018-1966, Cranleigh Nursing Home. John Whisker Drive, report. A proposal to erect a building to provide an 80-bed care home, including 20 community beds, together with the building. To provide health and workers accommodation with access of no lane associated parking and ancillary works. Now,
We have to do the deferment.
I know. The applicant has requested the deferral of this item for the following reasons, as has been announced on the council's website this afternoon. 1. The reasons given by the applicant are as follows. 1. To prepare verified views and sketch images of the proposed build on the site. 2. The applicant has requested additional time to review its proposal for a reduction of 20 to 25 car parking spaces on the site with county highways. And 3, reason number 2 refers to area of great landscape value. This is incorrect and should refer to policy C5, areas of strategic visual importance. The applicant says this area needs to be reissued to the for the public to consider the impact. Now, I need to invite JPC members to vote on whether we should defer this agenda item, but before I do so, I would like to invite any members who may wish to make any comments on this deferral motion. I believe at least Councillor Cossa.
Could I just ask, Chairman, before I say what I wanted to say, are we going to get any advice or response from our officers to the points that have been made in respect of deferral, or do you just want us to wade in? I'd rather, I think, hear what the officers had to say first, because some points have been made that seem to me to need some advice.
I'm advised it's just a deferral motion that really... Okay, if you wish to speak,
I will, yes, just briefly, Chairman. I just wanted to say that all I want to do is just encourage the committee to make sure that we do give proper consideration to this request, rather than, I think, just seek to defer it because there are a lot of people here. It may be very convenient to do so, and we've got a lot of information. But the reason I suggest that we ought to consider it quite seriously is I've spent a lot of time, I'm sure like other members, reading this application. I visited the site, and it's quite clear to me that there is a very central issue here as between the balance of community benefit and the impacts on views and so on that the officers have got. Now, there's a lot of information about the community benefit. There are some sketches and so on, but what I don't really get a feel for, having visited the site and having read the reports, is the impact that we are being asked to use to defer it on. So if further information and projections and things can be submitted to us to enable us to do that, I think that will enhance the quality of the decision we're being asked to take. And I would ask members to bear that seriously in mind when they consider this deferral request.
Thank you very much. Does any other councillor follows?
Thank you, Chair. First, can I just check how this is actually working? Because I don't see any motion actually been made or seconded. Can you just address that one quickly first?
Right. For the sake of everything, I'm going to propose a motion, but I shall abstain on voting. And I'll need a seconder, which obviously I have. All right. Does that satisfy you?
certainly satisfies the question regarding the process. Thank you. So in terms of this actual motion as it's now been put forward, I don't personally support a deferral because I think this has been kicking around within the system for some time. There is significant information within the reports to which I do not believe that the information that has been put forward for deferral is material to defer it further. Certainly I think we're all capable of absorbing the information on the screen and factoring that into our decision-making process, but I personally therefore don't support a deferral and think we should consider the application as reported. Thank you.
The councillor wishes to speak? Yes,
Yes, I concur with Councillor Follows. I do not think that we should be deferring this. In fact, I'm actually surprised that it has reached us. However, I think we should debate this fully and take it forward and make a decision.
Thank you very much. Any other councillor wish to make a comment on this before we vote? I would add we were using electronic voting tonight for all items. Oh, Councillor Hyman, yeah.
Just getting another cable.
Oh. Dan?
I'll be able to tell the results
Yes, okay.
via the microphone.
Okay, right. Councillor Hyman? Anybody else wish to speak as a councillor on the committee? No? No? Right, we'll move to the vote then, shall we? I do apologise. The proposal is to defer the consideration item. I shall move it, although I shall abstain. Councillor Coss has seconded this motion. If you wish to defer the item, vote yes. If not, vote no. And if you wish to abstain, vote abstain. Thank you very much. Oh dear.
Sorry, Chairman, I indicated to speak before 12.
Yes.
Is that not allowed?
Well, as I understand it, Councillor, you should speak on the main item. That's what we were talking about, rather than the deferment. So you will be speaking on the main item?
Yes, on the main item.
Yes, yeah. That's right, isn't it? Oh, dear.
Chairman, would you like... so the projectors, not projectors, sorry, we're having a problem with the projector at the moment. So the vote is on the motion to defer the application. So if you'd like to vote, you've got in front of you, your lights should be on. If you go ahead, I'll announce the result from my computer. And apologies for this.
What's this then? What's that then? Is that used to deferring?
She'll give you the figures very shortly, but it looks as though it's not going to be deferred, so we will be...
Registered to defer, though, used to defer.
And the results are that it is not deferred, so Emma will...
Emma, have you got the results, please?
Okay, there's 5 in favour of the motion to defer. There's 1 abstention and there's 14 against. So the motion is lost and we'll consider the application.
Thank you very much, Emma. Right, we'll move on to the application. I'll ask Mr Arthurs to present it, please.
Thank you, Chair. Extreme apologies. We've got a bit of a technical issue where the laptop has gone dead on me and my presentation's on it. So if you just bear with us for a couple of minutes and we will resolve the technical issue and then we will quickly move on to the presentation. Thank you for your patience and thank you to the audience.
I am very sorry about this, ladies and gentlemen, but we have just adjourning for a few minutes while the technical issues are sorted out. Can we defer it again? Well, you don't really want to see me sing and dance, do you? I mean, good. I think. I hope anyway. So, right, ready to go. Mr. Arthurs, would you be willing to present the case?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for that, and bear with me. Technology is sent to frustrate us all. Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members, and good evening, members of the public. And welcome. I'm here to present the Cranleigh Village Hospital application. The site, as some of you know it, is off Knoll Lane, north of Snoxhill Fields, and just south of the centre of Cranleigh. The proposal before us today is the erection of a building to provide an 80-bed care home, also known as a nursing home, including 20 community beds, together with a building to provide health workers accommodation with access from Knoll Lane. The application includes associated car parking and ancillary works. The location plan, as stated, it is a triangular site to the east of Knoll Lane, north of Snoxhill Fields, and the Downs Link public footpath runs to the edge of the site in a easterly direction. This is the aerial view of the site, and you can see the triangular site there. It is undeveloped at present. It is green field. It is surrounded on all sides by quite a dense banding of trees. You can see directly to the west of Knoll Lane is the Berkeley development site, to give you some orientation. The Cranleigh Leisure Centre is equally to the east of the site. Existing site photos. The first one in the corner is that's taken from the Cranleigh Leisure Centre. And again, the rest of the photographs are taken across the playing fields and the area towards the site, and that is the triangular edge of it in the corner there beyond the playing area. And this is a view into the field, as you can see it today. That was taken on Monday. It was rather wet, but not unpleasant. To the north and east of the site is the development, the housing development, which the name of which I tempt, John Whisker Drive, the very one, and this is the view from Knoll Lane with the new Berkeley scheme on the right in this particular photograph, and this is taken from the entrance. So the entrance to the site is now going to be a junction. Initially was a roundabout, so this has been amended, and the entrance is directly opposite the one to Berkeley. And again, these are views to Snoxhill Fields and from it on the edge, and again, you get a sense of the tree-lined edge and boundary of the scheme. In terms of what is proposed on the site, so the nursing home is formed of, it's an 80-bedroom unit, and this is what is known as a cruciform floor plate. It's predominantly over 2 floors, and there's a third-storey element within the centre of it. The health worker accommodation is to the south and east of that, to the rear of the site, in the block. And again, this is just more detail in terms of what that cruciform is. The access roads within the site, there's car parking, a designated car parking area to the front just off Knoll Lane, and that includes 40 car parking spaces, of which 4 would be for disabled parking use. The care worker housing includes 26 car parking spaces. Again, the site access to it has been amended. This provides an indication of where that access is and the turning circles, etc., etc. These are illustrative elevations. The elevations themselves are a mix of brickwork, render, tile hung with a clay tile roof, which is reflective of what is known as the Surrey style. And the building floor plate itself, so the length measured north to south is approximately 82.39 metres, and whilst the limb crossing east to west would be 76.4 metres. In terms of the main roof ridge would be 9.06 metres to the rising and 10.52 metres above the main entrance. The rooms within the care home would range between 25.3 metres and 25.6 metres, which is considered a reasonable size. Health worker accommodation, this is the floor plan and the design of that. So this development would be served by 26 car parking spaces. And that's the design. Okay, so the key areas of the planning considerations have been set out within the planning report. But before I go on to that, I think it's just worthwhile touching on the update sheet which members should have received. And in that, since the report was concluded, an additional 38 representations have been received. 11 of these are objections and 27 are in support. No specific new areas have been raised that haven't already been covered in the report. It has also been brought to my attention that within the body of the report we refer to Cranleigh Parish Council's representations, which were initially for support for the scheme, but following the submission of the amended plans for the access, this has now been amended to a recommendation for an objection to the scheme. The primary considerations there are on highway safety grounds, pedestrian hazard presented by the raised platform. They have a feeling that the care home didn't provide adequate information in relation to the funding ongoing and that it couldn't be secured in perpetuity, as well as the physical impact of the development on the site. Also, there's an amendment to reason for refusal, and my apologies for that. So we need to amend that to remove reference to area of landscape value. So reason for refusal number 2 now should state the site lies within an area of strategic visual importance within which the landscape character is to be conserved and enhanced. The proposal is inconsistent with this aim and conflicts with national, strategic and local plan policies set out in policy C5 of the retained policies of the Waverley Local Plan 2002. Questions have been asked in relation to the nature of any future planning agreement. I thought it would be pertinent to set out that, just to clarify, that no formal heads have been agreed for the planning agreement. If the committee were minded to overturn the officer's recommendation and grant a resolution for permission, the heads would include areas such as the travel plan, off-site travel highway works, securing the 20 community beds in perpetuity. The suggestion is there be a weekly percentage value reduction. At the present time, as stated within the financial appraisal, this is 41% of that of the market value. The health workers' accommodation will be secured. The definition of the health workers' accommodation and indeed the catchment area in which those health workers will be located is open to discussion and agreement with the various legal representatives, and the level of rent would be secured. At the moment, it's suggested that this would be a 28% reduction. So that's just to give you a sense of what could be included within the legal agreement. Okay. So now moving on to the consultation and representations that we have received in relation to the planning application. So the consultation technical responses, you'll see there are some of the key ones. So County Highways have reviewed the amended plans and have raised no objection, subject to a range of conditions. The headlines of those are outlined within page 17 of the committee report. Surrey Wildlife Trust, they also reviewed the documentation, and again, they have raised no objections, subject to a range of conditions. The Cranleigh Parish Council, again, they've reviewed it and have raised objections that I've outlined. The Environment Agency have raised no objection, provided that the recommendations within the flood risk assessment are implemented, particularly the raising of ground levels to 600 millimetres above the existing. The lead local flood authority, again, have raised no objection, but have asked for a condition on the surface water drainage strategy. And Environmental Health have suggested a number of conditions which, again, are outlined. In relation to the representations made, as outlined in the report on page 18 and 19, In terms of support, we've received 268 in total, including those that have recently been received. And in terms of the objections, there are 264, including 11 which have been received. The support for the scheme ranges from there is a need for this type of development in both Cranleigh and Waverley, through to the design is acceptable on the site, and the location is an appropriate one for this type of development. The range of objections range from there is no need for this type of development in Cranleigh, the site is inappropriate, the form of the development is inappropriate, and it will have an unacceptable impact on both the traffic flow on No Lane and the adjoining residents. Objections have been received in relation to the nature of the land transaction, the funding and function, and there's a feeling that some residents have been misled. Just to clarify, these cannot be considered as planning-based objections, and therefore should not be considered by the planning officer or indeed this committee. So there's quite a lot of detail in the report, and I don't propose to go through that. I'm sure a lot of you have reviewed that. But just really to focus in on what the key issues as we see, the officers see it in relation to it. So the starting point is the protection of national and local policy, and it is recognised that you need to safeguard the intrinsic character and beauty of the countryside beyond the green belt in which the site sits. Any development on the site must seek to protect and safeguard the countryside setting. The extent of any community benefit delivered by the development must be proportionate to the impact for the principle to be considered acceptable. So those are the two balancing factors. The scale and mass must be justified in terms of quantum via the viability assessment. And the community benefits are defined and can be secured by a legal agreement. Now, just to reflect on what has been approved on the site in the past. In 2003 and 2010, a scheme for the replacement of the Cranleigh Village Hospital was approved. This plan gives an indication of the nature and form of that proposal. You will see it is focused on the southern half of the site, with the car parking within the middle body of the site. And some indicative sketches for that scheme were provided. This scheme was not built out, and the application is not extant. So again, this provides you an indication of the site plan and the layout, and the indication really of how that compares with what was proposed and approved in the past. And again, this is some reserved matters that were received in 2016 that show a different orientation, a different layout, and a different height and form of built form. And again, this was approved. In terms of the design and landscape impact, the mass and scale of the building is considered not to be in keeping with the site context and has an unacceptable impact on the character of the area. In terms of the protected, the local area of protection, the landscape value was identified. So views to and across the site from the adjoining site area is restricted by tree cover, especially in the summer months. This is within the landscape visual impact assessments provided by the applicant. The LVIA also provided an image in relation to the bulk and scale of the proposed development. And this is it. So the red blocks, I mean, these are only indicative and they're crude in interpretation. But however, they do give you a sense of the bulk and scale of the building set within the existing landscape. And this view is from Snox Hall Fields, looking west. So in summary, the quantum and scale of the proposed development has been justified in terms of the financial viability of the scheme. So the 20 community beds, because we fundamentally ask the question, why does a development need to be this big in order to support the 20 community beds. So the financial appraisal was presented by the applicant, which was in turn independently assessed by Dixon Searle. They raised some concerns. They were answered by the applicant, and in turn Dixon Searle agreed with the conclusions that the scale, mass and form of the development was justified in order to secure it going forward. So in terms of a technical planning basis, we considered, the planning officer considered that acceptable. Other issues that we considered included the highways and parking. Again, we didn't consider there any technical reasons to refuse it. The impact on the adjoining properties, we felt that the distance of which is approximately 30 metres was acceptable, and that conditions could be applied in relation to lighting and the activity in the building, and noise attenuation of any plant, etc., could be applied in order to ensure that any disturbance would be minimised. The issues of flood, trees, biodiversity and archaeology equally were all assessed and found to be acceptable. So there are no technical objections raised on this basis. However, planning judgment was given that, on balance, the impact of the development was such that it was unacceptable in terms of its impact on the countryside and protected views, and that this cannot be overcome by the nature and the scale of the community benefit that is being offered by the proposed development. So that's in conclusion, that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Right, we have a number of public speakers on this item, as you can probably imagine. And first of all, I'd like to invite, I think it's Cathy Plank, who wishes to speak on behalf of the objector. Thank you. You have 4 minutes, Cathy, from when you start speaking, effectively, but you've got to press the button, yeah?
On?
Yeah.
Can everyone hear that? Okay. Do you tell me when to go?
Yes. Well, when you start speaking, yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay. Good evening. My name is Cathy Plank. I'm speaking on behalf of over 5,000 Cranleigh people, including all of those who have signed this petition objecting to this application. I'm one of the community who has donated to what has turned out to be a commercial application. 20 years is a long time in the lives of men, women, children who have fundraised for a new village hospital. When CVHT promised a hospital, barely a home, business, school or organisation wasn't proudly displaying the CVHT logo as they swam, cycled, played sport and held parties for the cause. The elderly held bridge and tea parties, legacies were left in wills. A good friend of mine donated £25,000 and one celebrated their Ruby anniversary with donations to the CVHT instead of gifts, all in the hope that our community would one day benefit from a new hospital. Approximately £1.4 million was raised in just over 10 years. The fundraising campaign gave birth to the Wings and Wheels event, and as the many bankers' orders were made out, many hundreds of money jars filled, so the CVHT charities' coffers have grown. However, over time, the situation has become blurred. The CVHT refused to meet or consult with villagers, the very people who donated land for £1 and raised £1.4 million for the cause, steaming ahead without asking the people who mattered. Yes, they held public consultations run by expensive PR companies, which resulted in much confusion. When is a hospital not a hospital? Well, it is referred to as a nursing home in tonight's agenda, when it is in fact a care home. There has been a huge lack of transparency in the CVHT's decision-making and no connection to the local community. So where is the community benefit for this proposal? A private commercial care home with 60 costly beds, plus 20 beds for communities potentially covering the whole county. No guarantee for the Cranleigh resident who invested hard-earned cash, time, expertise, volunteering skills, hopes and dreams. The accommodation block could also be available to all healthcare workers across the county. Cranleigh has existing care homes that has quite a number of beds available. They want to significantly overdevelop a greenfield ASVI site with a 3-floor building. Trees have been removed without planning permission, which they hope to get tonight to make the site look bigger. The plans will have an adverse effect on neighbours, noise, disturbance, loss of privacy, overlooking, a loss of light, increase in traffic, deliveries, hazardous materials present. of visual amenity damage, destruction of trees, wildlife in a climate emergency. I think most people here tonight would like to start a business with donated land and a windfall of £1.4 million. We urge you, over 5,000 Cranleigh residents, to dismiss this scheme, which demonstrates no credibility, no guarantee sustainability, no fulfilment to community need. This proposal seems to serve HC1 and the CVHT far more than it serves our Cranleigh community.
Thank you very much. Right, a spokesman, who's from Cranleigh Parish Council? Are you speaking?
Councillor Tyler.
Councillor Tyler? Here? Oh, there you are.
Good evening. Rowena Tyler speaking on behalf of Cranleigh Parish Council. The Parish Council was supportive of the Cranleigh Village Hospital Trust's original concept, namely provision of a new hospital and day hospital. This would have provided Cranleigh and surrounding villages with improved healthcare, partly funded by local donations, for the benefit of the community, not for commercial purposes or profit making. The Parish Council considered this development in planning terms, mindful of its responsibilities under the public interest of its parishioners and in line with the covenant on the land. The land transferred to the Trust and a land exchange by the Parish Council, it contained a restrictive covenant to ensure replacement of the hospital beds lost in 2006 from the village hospital. However, beds are now available to the whole of Surrey. A private care home is proposed for dementia patients with a separate accommodation block of compact bedsits with shared facilities for healthcare workers. The Parish Council find this unacceptable and cannot support it for the following reasons. The site is outside the settlement boundary in countryside beyond the green belt and within Cranleigh's only area of strategic visual importance. This significant larger scheme is overdevelopment of the site. It has a negative impact on views to and from the adjoining recreation grounds, the Downs Link, views from Village Way and John Whisker Drive. There are serious safety concerns of additional traffic movements from this site on an already congested junction of Knoll Lane and the High Street, and the welfare of pedestrians is compromised, especially young children crossing to the land exchanged to their football fields, particularly as other developments expand on Knoll Lane alongside further plans before you tonight. The site's 24-hour operation will produce odour, light and noise pollution to existing residents adjacent to the development. And due to the bulk and mass of blocks, neighbouring privacy will be invaded. There will be significant adverse effects on the amenities, and there will be a negative effect on the ASVI, including the Snoxall playing fields. The Council's Planning Committee raised additional concerns on the size of the hostel's accommodation technical space standards, the overdevelopment, lack of highways report, the limited amount of green space allocated on the completed site, and the need for landscaping, particularly on the boundaries. Putting a 1.8 metre fence up is not a benefit to the community, and it's not a benefit to the nature conservation. Guildford and Waverley CCG and Surrey County Council will only fund the community beds on a 5-year cycle and determine the day-to-day usage of them. The Parish Council is concerned how the community beds will be legally maintained forever as part of this private care home for the community benefit. There is no legal evidence of a link between the private care home, the 20 community beds and the accommodation block. The application states that the accommodation block could be used by any worker employed in healthcare provision from anywhere in Surrey. How can that be a local community benefit? The Council do not support this application. There is a lack of detail of the contractual and financial terms for the scheme, those for the 26 housing units, and lack legal definition of who can use the accommodation. On April the 15th, CVHT witnessed at the last parish planning meeting that they attended, councillors voting unanimously against this application. The Parish Council now stands before you to urge you to uphold the Waverley Planning Officer's decision to refuse permission for this development.
Thank you very much. We now have speakers in support of the scheme. We've got two speakers. We've got John Snedden and Giles Mahoney. Do you want to do 2 minutes each or what? Whatever you wish to do. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. We are disappointed with the recommendation because it does not conclude that the public benefits outweigh the limited harm to the landscape. The Council has approved 3 developments of a similar nature on this site in the past, some of which were more prominent and had a greater impact, including a full 3-storey building and in the most prominent part of the site. In each of these 3 applications, the Council decided that the benefits outweighed the harm. I would respectfully invite you to follow that precedent. The reason I ask you to do this is based on Council documents. Your strategy for ageing well in 2015 states that the largest older population in Surrey is within your area, and it has an over 85 population that is set to grow to 30% by 2020 since the last census. Your economic development strategy says key workers are priced out of housing. Council studies and reports flowed through into your local plan in 2018, which identifies amongst its objectives the ageing population, community infrastructure and affordable housing. The planning report is very clear in concluding that the care beds are needed and the affordable accommodation is both compliant and a community benefit. National guidance says that accommodation like this for care is critical. The planning report says that there is little doubt about the demand for nursing home beds locally. The NHS actually wrote in during the application and said there was a need for 419 free at the point of access beds by 2025. I would hope that in your balancing of the issues you would determine that the benefits here are significant and substantial. And I would add that this application is addressing the biggest issues in our community today: affordable housing, health and the ageing population. If it were not for a change of policy in 2010-2011 by the NHS, this building would have been built and private sector companies were involved at that time in those projects. Thank you, Chair.
I'm Giles Mahoney, the Director of the Integrated Care Partnership for Guildford and Waverley, a partnership between NHS organisations, Surrey County Council, local borough councils and the community and voluntary sector. This is my colleague Liz Iliash, Deputy Director of Adult Social Care, Surrey County Council. Surrey's population is increasing and ageing, resulting in increasing demand on health and social care services for people with complex needs. This scheme will guarantee high-quality, affordable beds for our residents, nominated by my organisation. The 20 community beds are proposed to replace the beds that used to exist in Cranleigh Hospital. They are of a different type, but are directly linked to the challenges we now face. Our ability to access affordable, high-quality beds will be addressed by this scheme, and we will have a policy of prioritising local people. The beds will help many people on a district-wide basis by freeing up space in the Royal Surrey Hospital wards, which will bring wider benefits to all Waverley people. While we can only sign a 5-year contract for budgetary and control issues, we have no reason to believe that our need will alter or change over time. In fact, all evidence currently available to the ICP shows that demand for these beds will endure into the future. The staff accommodation is needed given the cost of accommodation in this part of Waverley. We need infrastructure and capacity to respond to existing and emerging health and care needs of local people. This proposal will do that. I therefore hope you can support this.
On a final point, Chairman, in the few remaining seconds, this is not hospital beds. The Trust was set up to build hospital beds. It would have loved to have built hospital beds. What this is an evolution of those beds. It will deal with people having respite care, short-term care, and it will help with bed blocking. I've learned that in terms of the Guildford Hospital, more than 50% of the occupants are elderly people, and those elderly people need somewhere to go. And they would go here, Chairman. Thank you.
On the nose, as it were. Yes, thank you very much. Right, I have a number of... Councillor Ellis. Yes, Councillor Ellis, your turn.
Thank you, Chairman. I have noted the officer's recommendations relating to this application. My very serious concern is that refusal would result in the loss of 20 community beds free at the point of entry for the residents of Cranleigh and the surrounding areas. I accept that the application before us does not necessarily reflect what I and other residents of Cranleigh expected when the charity was formed many years ago, but the provision of 20 community beds within this application does in fact fulfil an extremely important part of the original aims of the charity. In the intervening years, I believe 20, many things have changed, including within the NHS. And I believe that we should now be considering how the proposals before us fit in with the current overall care facilities in Cranleigh. Cranleigh has retained its much-loved cottage hospital, where consultants and healthcare professionals hold regular surgeries, saving our patients from a lengthy and tiring journey into Guildford. The wards were closed many years ago and cannot be adapted to suit current, much improved requirements. But through the support of the Friends of the Cranleigh Hospital and residents, modern and up-to-date diagnostic facilities have been installed. And for example, the physio and the podiatry departments are all very, very busy. 18 years ago, our health centre was in a poor state of repair and not really fit for purpose. But we now have an award-winning building with many more services. And as the population of Cranleigh expands, it has the capacity to provide accommodation for an increased number of GPs and other healthcare professionals. The application includes an accommodation block, which will encourage healthcare workers to come to Cranleigh, where the lack of suitable and affordable accommodation has always been a problem and a discouragement to suitable employees. We have a number of excellent nursing homes within the area that serve an ageing population extremely well, but most are very expensive. And I believe from the viability report that through this application, an excellent standard of nursing care, including end-of-life care, will be financially available to a greater number of people that will also be close to their families and loved ones. The officers have given 3 reasons for recommendation for refusal. I believe 1 is incorrect and has been withdrawn. And I do accept that we, as far as possible, need to protect the areas of the countryside beyond the green belt. But this site is very close to the high street and the centre of the village, where there are good transport facilities and car parks. Sadly, we have to accept that there is the large-scale development under construction directly opposite the site, and other large developments in close proximity. I believe that the provision of the 20 free at the point of entry community beds that can be achieved by the granting of permission for this application and the provision of additional care facilities is absolutely vital to the overall and excellent healthcare services in Cranleigh. Thank you.
After the opportunity, does Ward Council have the opportunity to come back at the end, if you so wish?
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, thanks speakers for their clear representations, and I won't. I don't think there's any need for me to repeat those, but I agree with the officer's reasons for refusal. But if I may, I would like to question whether those reasons can be strengthened. I found it a little bit odd because it seems weird. I can find some viability references, but I can't find viability assessments on the application record. That may be my eyes or the website. I appreciate that the applicant may have chosen not to make their viability statements public and available to the councillors. That is their right, I understand. But in the absence of viability reasons, justification, or exceptional circumstances, I would have to question the justification for departure from the policies, and particularly in respect of, I know this development came in at the very end of 2018, but with it coming forward to us now, is that whether CIL charging should be applied to this development, I think has to be questioned. In respect of the quantum of beds and homes and the community benefits, which of course I think we all know are questionable, I would ask whether the scale and mass is justified by the viability assessments. I think that's one of the decisions the committee has to make, and I see that's not actually mentioned in the reasons for refusal on page 44 in the update. On the screen, you put up there something in respect of the scale, whether the scale and mass is justified. Though the words scale and mass don't appear in reasons 1 or 2, and so I'd like to ask whether they should be added. Furthermore, I'd just like you to confirm, are there any viability reports? If not, is that an additional strong reason for refusal? Is CIL due on this? Can you add the scale and mass to reason and refer to the balance in the reasons for refusal? And could you also add highway and pedestrian safety as a reason for refusal? Because I know that is of some concern. And whilst Highways' opinion does have great weight, they are not the decision maker and they don't necessarily have the benefit of local knowledge. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hyman, do you wish to speak, Councillor Townsend? Okay, thank you.
I'd like to listen to what my colleagues have to say first. Thank you.
Yes, okay. Right. Councillor Follows to start.
Thank you, Chair. And yes, I agree with Councillor Hyman. Thank you to all the speakers for coming and making representations on this, because it's clearly a fairly controversial application. And certainly, while sympathetic to the issues Ms Plank raised, most of those issues I think would be matters that aren't related to planning, and I would urge them to maybe consider writing to the Charities Commission on some of those matters. I think just in sort of some of the questions that have been raised throughout this, I do have some issue with coming to terms with the scale of community benefit that's actually provided. And as much as there is a section, and I apologise, my electronic copy doesn't have page numbers, but it's in 12.4, we're talking about a quadruple lock on the ability to maintain those beds in perpetuity. I would like to ask officers the question of what happens when we hit the end of Surrey's budgeting run and they haven't got that money. They might have the demand, but they might not have the funding. What happens at that point? Do the beds potentially become private at that point? What's the status of them if Surrey or another public body cannot afford them? I assume they won't remain empty, but does that mean that they'll be put to private use? So I need to understand the nature of those beds if somebody runs out of money. Certainly extremely sympathetic to the idea that the mass and scale is not in keeping. I went on the previous site visit in the previous council. I didn't go on the most recent one, but looking at the presentation by officers, it is rather stark. Could officers comment on the technical space standards question raised by the parish council? And I think these last two things are pretty much just comments from me. I have some real issue with that housing being described as affordable housing. I mean, it is basically student dormitories. I really don't think we should be putting that type of housing and classing it as affordable housing in the same way that we would class it. And finally, just in response to Councillor Ellis's comments, proximity to good transport in Cranleigh is an incongruous statement to me. There is almost no such thing as good transport in Cranleigh. As someone who has to use public transport to get to Cranleigh frequently as a councillor, I find that a difficult argument to accept. So for all of those reasons, and unless I'm given information to the contrary by officers, I will be voting to support the recommendation to refuse. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chairman. First of all, I'd like to echo the comments of Councillor Follows about what it is we need to address our minds to this evening. There's been a lot of comment and there's been a lot of literature around about the original proposal for the beds in Cranleigh, and I'm sure a lot of people feel terribly let down. However, there are another group of people who feel actually things have moved on and we have to look at things as they are today. Frankly, those aren't issues we can get involved in here. What we have to address is the planning issues. And I think there is a very central issue here that we have to decide. We have to balance, as we do in so many of these things, the damage and harm that it might do to the environment, and in this specific context, we have to look at that, and we have to measure it against whatever benefits or values there may be. The officers have done that, and they've taken a considered view as to on which side, and they did use themselves the word balance. I have done the same. I have visited the site, and I have not reached the same conclusion. And the reason I have not reached the same conclusion is that I find the arguments about the intrusive, the impact on views and things of that kind quite hard to actually take in. I was disappointed that we didn't agree earlier to have some more opportunity, because I don't think those red indicative blocks gave us any real sense at all, frankly, of what we might be looking at. But nonetheless, it is as it is, and we've decided to move forward. I do note that other applications, which I don't actually consider that significantly different, have been given approval on this site before. And I think, yes, there is an argument there, but I don't think it's a strong one. What we have to do is weigh it against the very, very significant, in my judgment, community benefits that arise from this proposal. 20 community beds for local people, much needed care provision. Yes, Waverley does have a lot of old people, and we do need this provision. I'll listen on this one to the Health Authority and the County Council and their social care people, and I listen to what they say, and they are very much behind this proposal. So I think it will be a nonsense for us to suggest that this isn't needed. Together with whether you call it affordable housing or not, I think we know what it's for, and it's the sort of accommodation that I actually do believe is much needed. There is a need for this. The independent viability report has suggested that it is appropriate to develop at this scale in order to deliver these benefits. The design is going to be quite appropriate, I suspect, but it's behind. I mean, my first question when I went on the site visit is, how many of these trees are going to be retained to screen this site? And the simple answer...
But we're in 4 minutes. You've had 4 minutes already.
Really? I didn't see the clock start, Chairman.
Guess
Are you
what?
sure I've had
Technical
4
problem
minutes?
in my
I don't
life.
think so.
Yes.
I don't know about 4. Yeah. Are you seriously saying I've had 4 minutes?
Yes.
Can I then make one concluding sentence, Chairman, with your agreement? As I had nothing to lead me on the clock. I just want to say there are lots of reasons. They will all come up in the debate, but I think we will make a serious mistake, and we will not forgive ourselves if we turn down the opportunity to provide this much-needed community benefit in Waverley.
4 more speakers listed at the moment. Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Chairman. I have 2 points. One is, I think, well, 3 actually. I think this one, I think this development looks very suitable, and I accept all the comments that have been made about the need for something this size, but I do think it's actually in the wrong place, and I think it is overdevelopment of this particular site. The other thing is, I think that this discussion is actually premature, because I think I'm very concerned about this lack of a planning agreement, which is already in, at least heads of terms already in place. So at the moment, as it says at the back of the page 2 of the additions, if we approve this at this point, that planning agreement is completely open-ended, and the developers can decide that actually they don't want what the council would want to put in as controls. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Keane.
Thank you, Chairman.
Well, like Councillor Follows, I am quite concerned about the 20 beds. I see that they talk about a quadruple lock and they talk about beds in perpetuity. Well, you can't actually guarantee perpetuity. But the 20 beds, are they for Cranleigh and area residents? Are they defined for that? Because if they're not, then people will come from outside. And likewise with the nursing home, are they guaranteeing beds for the Cranleigh patients, or are they going to be for the whole of the Waverley and Surrey area, which is at the moment a nursing home does do. They take patients from anywhere. So, you know, that is another reason that I'm concerned. I just feel that the benefits to Cranleigh really aren't very big. And at the end of the day, if you've got people coming in from well outside of the area, all they're going to get is a lot more transport coming in and out of Cranleigh with very little benefit for them. Thank you.
Councillor Denis.
Thank you, Chair. It's interesting, I was down Knoll Lane today. I drove up there twice. I had to go through all the puddles, which covered half the road. I think I probably knocked my steering out with the potholes. And then a lorry came and I had to stop and pull over. I'll say no more, but that was my view today, twice. I'm grateful for, I think it was Kathy and the parish for their views. I think it was very interesting. I don't always agree with Patrick, but on this occasion I do. I think it was a well set out report. And to me, and I've argued in this, in joint planning and in Eastern, about this conflicts with a policy, and I've been the first to say that, and probably quite forceful. Now, having gone through the report, there are 8 policies that this conflicts with. 8 policies. Why have we got a local plan that sets out policies if we just ignore it? And how could I next time, when I then want to disagree with Patrick, saying it conflicts with a policy, if I'm not true to my word? When you look at the applications over the years, it's gone from 2,180 square metres, looks like, to 4,174, to 6,180, a 48% increase. And one of the points I thought was really, if you want to talk about the scale of mass, I think when you put the illustration up, you couldn't squeeze much more in if you had a crowbar. It is absolutely crammed full. And when you look at the north to south limb, it is 86 metres long. Now, I learnt it as sort of yards and feet. That is 282 feet long. Now, I'm sorry, that is not protecting our countryside. This is countryside outside the Greenbelt. This is outside the development. It's 282 foot for the north to south limb. Then you add all the car parking and everything else. I agree with the reasons for refusal, and I will be supporting those reasons for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I look at the report from the NHS. On 7th of January this year, the NHS long-term plan, formerly known as the 10-year plan, was published, setting out key ambitions for the service over the next 10 years. One of the important bits in there is that they aim for place-based care nearer to home. That's the important bit. We have here a chance of 20 community beds. I represent Hindhead, a small village where we have 8 nursing homes, the largest of which is a 98-bed building, remarkably similar to that, except it's not quite L-shaped as that one is. One of the biggest problems we have in that area is staffing for all those 8 homes. I look at the density problem that we've talked about. In 2003, that's nearly 17 years ago, there was a certain density. Whether we look at any development that was proposed in 2003, if you came in with the same area in 2019, you would see a much greater density. I find the design, the appropriate size and scale, the mass to be acceptable. The community benefit to me is considerable, and on balance, I will support I will not support the officer's recommendation on this case. Thank you.
Councillor Coburn.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, people have said most of what I suppose really and truly are the main points of the argument. Planning is always about a balance. That's what we're here for. It's always a judgment, and it's always, as Councillor Dean has said, based on policy. Otherwise, it's not fair to anyone. And what I think is wrong with this, and why I should be supporting the officer's recommendation, is the sheer mass and scale of what is proposed. As Councillor Dean has said, the design is, when you see it like that, is quite pleasant. But just look at the site. It is absolutely, as Councillor Dean has just said, full of the built form. To me, it's completely at odds with Councillor Dean has mentioned 8 policies. I couldn't be quite as accurate as that, but certainly TD1, D1 and D4 come to mind just looking at it. You know, there is no design, there's no townscape in that. To me, it's just trying to fill in as much of the green area as you can with built form. And then you look at the built form, the sheer scale and mass of it, it is huge. It cannot possibly do anything but harm the visual impact. It's just far too large. You can put as many trees up as you like, but when you've got, you know, something as large as that, you're not going to hide it. It will have, to me, an unacceptable impact on the countryside beyond the green belt. I think that space is a vital bit of green space, and if I were a Cranleigh resident, I must say I think I'd be fighting for that to remain a green space, or sort of largely. But I just feel this is just too much on a small site in the wrong place. And I agree with the officer's recommendation. I do not think this is a suitable plan for that site. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've listened very carefully to the representations that have been made from residents of Cranleigh and also my fellows. I keep going back to the principle that the principle of development has already been established on this site. So we're really talking about the size of it. I think one of my councillors made an observation that we continually say that we're building too many houses in too small a place. Now here we've got an example of someone designing a building for the purpose. It's gone through a viability exercise. This is the viable size and scale. It has significant benefits, as we've heard, and I totally endorse Councillor Isherwood's comments about being this question of place-based care. And it's not just for Cranleigh, it's also for some of the villages around Cranleigh as well. And what worries me is if this is rejected, where are we going to go from here? We're not going to get a hospital. The beds and the problems within Surrey are going to continue. So I've got a dilemma. The principle's been established, and I take all the points. Perhaps we wouldn't have liked to have started to be here, but we have been going through this for many, many years. And the question is, are the benefits going to outweigh? And it's this balance. And to my mind, I'm minded to say that there are significant benefits in here versus the harm that's actually caused. And that's where I stand at the moment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just 3 points. The weight given when we are discussing the earlier approved planning applications was given for the building of an actual hospital, which carries an awful lot more weight than a private nursing home, regardless of the beds. Our officers have given us good and valid planning reasons to refuse this application. And to my mind, if we actually approved it, we'd be driving a coach and horses through not only our local plan, but also our relationship with our parish and town councils. So I am certainly in favour of accepting the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Edmonds.
Thank you, Chairman. My main concern is the ability to enforce community benefits. I've had a long-term career of trying to enforce contract conditions with almost unlimited resources, and the time and effort that the organisation needs to actually deliver success is out of all proportion. I cannot see how the community benefit can be assured, so I support the officer's refusal. The second point I'd make, which has already been made, is that it is overdevelopment, and I certainly wouldn't be a client of that nursing home. Thank you.
Councillor Townsend, you wish to speak?
Thank you, Chairman. I found it really useful. Thank you, everybody, for all your comments. It is very useful to me. I am concerned about the security of the community beds over a longer period than the 5 years. And I am aware of Surrey County Council's initiative to try and keep people in their homes for longer. And that although they may block book the beds for perhaps a year at a time, they will only renew that contract if the care home price remains within their budget. So it's only done on an annual basis. So from the point of the community benefit, the concerns about the time period that this can be secured for, with all the best will in the world and with all the best intentions, it is a little bit difficult. My other concern has been about the accommodation, and it's good to hear what people have to say and to also hear the comments from the parish council. But what these single occupancy rooms, and although we might like to be able to house workers on the site, we are actually providing what's called hostel style accommodation for them, just a single room. We're not allowing these people to have partners there. There won't be the opportunities for them to have families, to have friends over. They're single occupancy rooms. It's not something that has been objectively assessed need for that has been found in Cranleigh. And it's our key worker policy, although, I absolutely welcome housing for key worker. I'd like it to be in the form of flats, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom flats that meet with our SHMA, with our strategic housing market assessment. And the key worker allocation was included in our SHMA, and there isn't a separate allocation for it, and there's not a separate allocation that we need to meet. The housing is being classed as affordable, but CVHT aren't a registered provider, and it is difficult to see how they don't meet with our allocations policy. So I am struggling with the term affordable housing being attributed to this housing. And the fact that potentially it's going to be something like £176 a week for people to perhaps have one of these rooms, I don't really see that that's affordable for a care worker who's on, say, £8 to £10 an hour. That works out a very high percentage. So I would like to see care workers coming to the village. I would like them to see them in some of the 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom flats that we are currently being built on places like, Hewitt's Industrial Estate. I do think it's overdevelopment of the site. And as it's on the ASVI, the point of the ASVI is to stop the urban sprawl. And let's face it, Cranleigh has very little landscape protection. And it is important that we try and protect this site as much as we possibly can. And my normal concern is, again, about the wildlife surveys on this site, and perhaps the absence of wildlife surveys on the site as well. So I'm not convinced at this moment about that the community benefit can be secured in perpetuity. And I'm also not convinced at the moment that proposed development, the harm can actually be outweighed at the moment. Thank you.
Councillor James.
Thank you, Chairman. Unusually, I'm not supporting the officer's recommendation. Perhaps I should declare an interest as somebody over 70. I shall probably be in these beds. The other, I've spent my whole life going in and out of Cranleigh. I find it interesting that it says here that there was no, as some said, it's the wrong area for this development, but actually, in 2 occasions, the officers say there are no other known sites that are suitable for this to come across. So that one, it is the right place for this application. Having spent all this time trying to stop all the development in Cranleigh with 3-storey houses all bunged in everywhere, this is actually 2 stories with a tiny bit in the roof. I think it is needed, and the 20 community beds are a bonus, because unless I'm completely mistaken, that if you are a county councillor person in need of nursing home, they pay private nursing homes for you to go in because they don't run that many of their own. Therefore, you might get other people still in part of this other 60 beds that are paid for by whichever authority is paying for the care. These homes always say they don't pay enough for it, but they do pay and fill up the beds. So it might be more than 20 beds because there might be other people in some of the other 60 beds. So it is in the right place. We do need a lot more old people's homes or care homes or whatever kind of home it is it's required. And a 1-bedroom flat, you're never going to get a 1- or 2-bedroom flat paid for within the community there. And quite frankly, when I first started as a nurse, a nursing home, you didn't even get your own bathroom or anything else, and quite frankly, it was very nice. And so it's what I call a nurse's home. So there is a need. All the other sites were in the countryside beyond the green belt, and various inspectors have said it's perfectly all right to build in that. This site is as near, and the officers say it's the only available site. So I'm afraid I won't be supporting the officers, and I will be voting for the application. Thank you.
The councillor wish to speak? Right, okay.
Good evening, Chairman. Just to say that we have spoken a lot about how this site is completely filled by buildings, and I would just like to point out that this is actually going to have impact on the wildlife. And if you even look at the papers in front of us, they're saying that the birds will be impacted, and bats, and dormouses, and otters, and water voles. And also when they put a high volume of traffic past all these trees, which are supposing masking the view, many of those trees are going to die. So I really feel that we're talking about this as just buildings, but there are so many other things that are being impacted. That's all I would say.
Thank you very much. Is there speak for a minute? Right. Oh, just one more.
I know these aren't planning considerations, as per usual. There is reference to electric vehicle charging point, but it doesn't say how many, whether there's charging points for all units, for staff. It doesn't, and we don't know this, whether there's any grey water systems provided to conserve fresh drinking water. It doesn't say whether there's any PV panels for putting power back into the grid. I know these aren't planning considerations, but they are environmental considerations, and I'd just like to question it. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, Councillor, that would be if it was being approved at this moment in time, rather than being the recommendation refused. But anyway, okay. Councillor Ellis, you have the last word, I think, is the word, almost. Or the opportunity to have the last word, anyway.
Thank you, Chairman. I would quite like to mention to Councillor Follows that there is a bus service to Guildford every half an hour. There is a bus to Horsham. There is a bus service to Ewhurst as well. Not perfect, but actually there are services for people visiting the village. With regard to the 20 community beds, which to me is the most important aspect of this application, Cranleigh residents would have priority in the use of these beds. and will be filling the beds because we have a huge
Okay.
number of residents. But
Can-
I will
Councillor,
accept...
just clarifying the points, we just, please, that you know. I mean, we understand what you're saying, but you're saying, is just clarifying any final points you want to make? Is that it?
I'm terribly sorry, Chairman. The beds will obviously be filled by other people if Cranleigh people do not need them. And I do believe that the NHS service cannot enter into legal agreements of more than 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, I think we move to the vote, don't we?
My apologies, Chair. Could we possibly have an answer from officers on the in perpetuity guarantee of the benefits? We've all
Good
spoken
idea.
about it, but we haven't actually heard an answer. Sorry.
No. Yes. Patrick.
Thank you, Chair. So, in relation to the questions asked in relation to viability, those reports were actually provided and summaries of them on the planning webpage, so they were available for everyone to see. In relation to how is the benefit to be secured, well, as indicated, the heads of terms have yet to be agreed, and that is the minutiae, the detail that would need to be resolved. I mean, one has to think about this in the same way as one secures affordable housing in perpetuity, that, you know, that it is within the legal agreement, and you were simply stated. A very simple mechanism has been suggested, and that would be to relate a percentage reduction on the market value to be established at that point that could be index linked. That's only suggested, and it hasn't been agreed. So, unfortunately, the detail hasn't been agreed. If members chose to overturn the officer's recommendation and to recommend a resolution to grant, that would clearly be subject to the signing of an agreed Section 106. And you could ask for that Section 106 and the detail of it to be brought back to this committee to be considered. Unfortunately, I don't have the answer to your question now, but you have the mechanism there in order to interrogate that if you so choose.
Am I right, Patrick, in saying in perpetuity has already been misnomer, it can only be the maximum of 5 years? Is that correct?
No, in perpetuity would mean that the scale of community benefits in the development would be secured for the lifetime of that use. What has been said and what is the issue at hand that everybody seems to be concerned about is that the Health Trust can only secure funding for a 5-year period, and it can only guarantee it for that 5-year period. Obviously, the asset, as I see it, the asset will still remain in place. So whoever the operator or the owner, that liability would be passed on with that asset and clearly impact on the value of said asset. And that's where I see it, that as obviously a planning issue, but one that I think that could be resolved through an appropriate legal mechanism. But again, I think that could be brought back to this committee if members were so inclined to overturn the recommendation. I think that's all I can say at the moment.
Okay, I think we need to move to the vote, yes? The recommendation is the permission be refused for the reasons outlined, 1, 2, amended 2, 3, and informatives 1 to 2 on page 44 of the report. Again, we'll vote. Now, again, we're voting for the recommendation is for refusal. So it's a refusal to vote yes, and if you want to vote against that, you vote no. Okay, please? Time to go and vote, please. So it's yes. Okay? Okay, that's that then. And we have a result, do we? That's the result. Okay, Emma?
So we have 15 in favour of refusal, 1 abstention and 5 against refusal.
Then
So it's refused.
the application. Thank you very much. At this point, I stand down. And yes.
We are just pausing for a few seconds while one member comes back from the toilets. Could members of the public, please, if they're going, please go. Otherwise, please sit down. We're about to restart the session. Thank you. Okay, we're about to restart. People, please settle down. Including members, please settle down.
Back. You're going to have to gavel, I think.
Yep.
Bang the gavel.
Please, members, please sit down so we can restart. Thank you. There's still people missing? Okay, I believe we are now complete, so we'll restart. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, so next item is item 6.2, Cranleigh CV Primary Upper School and Cranleigh CV Lower School Parsonage Road. Outline application for erection of 91 dwellings, including 27 affordable dwellings. And so, Kate, you present the application, please.
So here we can see the location plan for the site, which, as you can see, is a split site. The existing upper primary school is here, and the existing lower primary school is here, or rather the junior school and the infant school, as they are quite often known. Surrey County Council is proposing to, in effect, amalgamate the two schools into one and re-provide that elsewhere in order to improve the educational facilities within Cranleigh. And so these sites are proposed for housing. You can see here in relation to the junior school site, it's predominantly accessed, and its vehicular accesses are off Parsonage Road, which runs along here. To the opposite northern side of the road, you can see the Gleeblands Secondary School site, where a replacement primary school is currently proposed. To the south of the site, you can see the High Street, and you'll note within the red line there's this limb coming out to the south, which is an existing access to the primary school, which is proposed for retention within the residential scheme. In relation to the infant school site here, you can see Dewlands Lane down here, which is proposed to provide the main vehicular access alongside an existing two-way road, which is between some of the dwellings on Dewlands Lane. The primary school is currently accessed by car by Church Lane, which runs adjacent to St Nicholas Church, but there isn't a significant drop-off operation there. the application that is proposed is for outline consent for 91 dwellings. So at this stage, we don't have full details of things like layout and appearance and landscaping. So moving now to photos of the application site. Here we can see the car park to St Nicholas Church, where you can see this yellow hatched parking area is also within the St Nicholas Church car park, and here you can just see the gates to the infant school. And here we can see Julian's Lane, which is proposed to be the main vehicular access to the houses which are proposed within the existing infant school site. As you can see, there's an existing two-way road running just along here, which currently ends with the boundary to the school, but it's proposed that that would be opened up. Also on Julian's Lane, you can see just beyond the two houses here, there's a turning head at the end of the road and the access to the cemetery. And moving now to the junior school site, you can see here the main elevation of the main entrance to that building. As you can see, it's a two-storey flat roof building. And looking along Parsonage Road towards the junior school site, you can see this existing situation. This building visible here is Gleebland School, and the junior school is just beyond the side here, adjacent to the existing bus drop-off bays, which are proposed for retention with some minor alterations to the accesses to the site. And moving now to the proposed plans, as an outline application, we're not considering at this stage the detailed layout. So effectively the image you can see here and the placement of the dwellings and gardens and so on is only indicative, and it's not something which we're approving. We're solely approving the principle of the development, that number of units, and the accesses onto the site. And there would be an additional 2 pedestrian accesses, and the existing eastern and western car accesses to the site from Parsonage Road would be either slightly amended in terms of the location or widened, but not in such a way as to have a material impact on the functionality of the bus stands adjacent on Parsonage Road. And the layout of the infant school site is shown here, alongside the key point being that the new vehicular access would be created into the development site from this area of land here, which would be off Julian's Lane. So the existing car access arrangement from adjacent to St Nicholas Church car park wouldn't be carried forward to the residential development. In terms of housing mix, 91 units are proposed. We are considering the affordable housing provision at this stage, and the applicant is proposing to provide 27 units of affordable housing, which meets our policy requirement of 30% in full. And the matters for consideration in relation to the application are the acceptability of the residential development of the site, including in relation to the loss of the existing school. The loss of the school from this site is acceptable in light of the fact that it can and would be re-provided elsewhere. There is currently an application with Surrey County Council to re-provide a suitable primary school within the Gleebland site. So on that basis, there's no objection to the loss of the primary, as it could be re-provided. The mix of units is considered to be acceptable, whilst the units proposed don't exactly meet the requirements of the SHMA. They're broadly in line with it and do provide a good mix of tenures. The suitability of the affordable housing, as I said, it meets policy requirement, and it would also provide some units of social rented housing, which would make it truly affordable for many members of our many residents of the borough on the waiting list who can't afford the more expensive affordable housing tenures. In relation to highways and parking, it's satisfactory. It's proposed that the residential elements would have parking in line with our published guidance standards, and equally Surrey County Council, as the Highways Authority, have no objection in terms of impact on the surrounding highways network. The loss of the existing playing fields, both from within the site and from the re-provision of the school on the Gleeblands site, has also been considered. And because a very detailed sports mitigation strategy has been proposed, which includes a number of sporting improvements, that is considered satisfactory, and Sport England have stated no objection to the proposal on that basis. In terms of the impact on the setting of heritage assets, particularly St Nicholas' Church, which is immediately adjacent to both sites between them. This is considered satisfactory. At this stage, we're not considering the detailed appearance of the proposed buildings, but we can see that there is a suitable possible solution there which won't adversely impact on the heritage assets. Equally, in terms of trees, a number of conditions are recommended to control this matter, and it's not considered that there would be any harm to trees which are of significance within the site. In relation to the living conditions for future occupiers, so the level of garden space and internal floor space provided, the impacts on neighbours in terms of light, outlook and privacy, and of the proposal in design terms upon the visual amenity. These are all matters which are reserved, so we can't consider them in detail at this stage. However, it is evident in terms of the principle that a development of this density can be accommodated within the site, which would satisfy those parameters. Equally, in relation to flooding and drainage, the proposal is considered acceptable, both in terms of fluvial or river flooding and in terms of surface water flooding. And finally, in relation to biodiversity and sustainability, the proposal is also considered acceptable. So that's everything in terms of the presentation. I've now got an update sheet to take you through, and also a verbal update. And I hope you had before the meeting an update sheet here. The first item on that is in relation to the two additional representations have been received. One of them, I think, is based on a misunderstanding that this application has been determined in relation to an article that was in the local press. The second representation predominantly raises concerns with regards to the alternate school site which is proposed on Gleeblands, which isn't a matter which is for consideration in relation to this application. Finally, in relation to the update sheet, I've also proposed an amendment to the recommendation to add in the provision of an appropriate replacement educational facility to the matters to be secured in the legal agreement. Whilst that was included within the list of heads of terms for the legal agreement within the report, it wasn't included within the recommendation, so I thought it was important to add that in. So that concludes the update sheet which I have given you, and I've also got some further verbal updates. You'll be aware of the requirement under the pre-commencement condition regulations to consult with the applicant regarding pre-commencement conditions. On that basis, we've had a conversation which has resulted in some proposed changes to the conditions, bearing in mind their comments. In relation to the recommendation, I've also proposed to remove a reference to the provision of off-site environmental improvements, as this isn't specific and doesn't relate to any of the current mitigation which is required for the proposal following the introduction of our SIL charging schedule. In relation to the conditions, I propose to provide clarification in relation to the plan numbers condition that they're indicative matters only, other than the access as shown on the plans. In relation to condition 4, it's recommended that this condition is now deleted, and that's in relation to the re-provision of a school, as that would be more securely tied up within the legal agreement. in relation to condition 8, which is the water supply impact studies, I'm proposing an amended wording to that condition to ensure that sufficient water supply is provided without adverse impact on other users around the site prior to occupation rather than as a pre-commencement requirement. Recommended conditions 13, 14 and 15 all relate to different matters in relation to noise assessment, and I now recommend that they are deleted as this is included within the Construction Environmental Management Plan, which is condition 18. And I've just recommended to sort of fully tie that up in relation to condition 18, that another detail is added to that condition to clarify that that also relates to the first occupiers of the site whilst the development continues on the rest of the site. A slight amendment to the wording of condition 19 in relation to flood lighting is also proposed to tie in with the Construction Environmental Management Plan. And finally, in relation to condition 21, the biodiversity enhancement, an amendment to the report reference there is proposed. And that is all of the amendments which are proposed to the conditions, and brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Just one second. Okay, we'll have the verbal update sheet up on the projector there. Okay, so in the meantime, we have some public speakers. The first speaker I've got is Marion Ireland. If you want to step forward, so you've got 4 minutes from the time you sit down and get ready to go and press the button. Yes, but so make yourself comfortable. Okay, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm writing to objecting to this development as it will increase the traffic pressure on the already congested St Nicholas Avenue and Parsonage Road. I am a resident of St Nicholas Avenue in Cranleigh. This is during the school drop-off and pick-up. There are too many cars both parked and driving on these roads during the school drop-off and pick-up times, and the proposed developments will exacerbate this problem. The current positioning of the primary schools has a lesser effect on St Nicholas Avenue and Parsonage Road due to the convenience of the car park adjacent to the church rooms behind St Nicholas Church and access from the High Street. If the schools move across the road into Glebeland School land, this car park will be too far from the new school, forcing motorists onto St Nicholas Avenue and Parsonage Road. Motorists damage the grass verges on St Nicholas Avenue by both parking and driving on them during the school drop-off and pick-ups. There is no one to challenge this inconsiderate behaviour or highway code violations. The current position is unacceptable for both the users of the road and also the residents of St Nicholas Avenue. Not only the proposed development will make things worse. It should be noted that in my experience, congestion does not occur for the most part during the school holidays because of the significant reduction in both parked cars and moving traffic. The former, mostly employees of Cuthbert Main School, that has increased during the last 18 years that I've lived in St Nicholas Avenue. However, if employees' parking was removed and no parking controls were put in place, the drop-offs and pick-up vehicles would easily fill these spaces, so the congestion would not reduce. Motorists, including carers, also park across the footpath entrances used by large numbers of children and carers, and on the zigzag markings outside St Cuthbert Main School, thereby putting the safety of the students at risk as they emerge onto this busy road from between parked vehicles. The addition of posts to stop motorists driving and parking on these verges has urbanised what was once a very nice avenue in a rural village. For the most part, residents, myself included, have no need to park on the road as we have the benefit of off-road parking. We are not causing the congestion. This is caused by this concentration of schools into a small area of the village and dependence on cars by employees, parents and carers visiting these schools. Some months ago, I was shocked to see and hear a very large lorry reversing down the road in the path of children trying to cross the road at the footpath that crosses St Nicholas Avenue. The only gap that day was on the zigzags outside the school, so he actually had to park in that area to allow traffic to pass down St Nicholas Avenue. There was a further occasion when a large people carrier was stationary on the pavement outside my house, taking up the whole space, leaving residents nowhere to walk, and it was literally inches from my nose when I stood on the edge of my drive. Just last Thursday, I saw cars driving along the grass verges, and on Friday, a bus reversed onto the grass outside my home to let the school buses pass. This is unacceptable. The congestion in St Nicholas Avenue is a regular occurrence, and St Nicholas Avenue is already dealing with far more traffic than it was designed for. The proposed development will for both the relocated school and the housing development, with the inevitable increase in cars and traffic, would just add to the existing congestion and road safety issues, and for that reason it should not go ahead.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Councillor Rosemary Burbidge from Cranleigh Parish Council.
Can I just say one small thing? I do have some photos of St Nicholas Avenue. Funnily enough, they've got a lot more cars on them than the ones provided by the planning officers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Rosemary, you have 4 minutes.
Good evening, councillors. As you've heard, I'm Rosemary Burbidge, and I am delivering this statement, which has been prepared by Cranleigh Parish Council, so it's not quite in my own words. Cranleigh Parish Council objects to this planning application to build 91 dwellings across the 2 school sites in the heart of Cranleigh village. The planning application has been amended 3 times to reduce the number of dwellings from 98 to 91 at the expense of additional affordable housing units, but it has not been accompanied by a revised plan, making it impossible for the council to comment on the latest layout. The plan is for a high-density development with inadequate parking for the proposed dwellings in the centre of the village, where parking is already at a huge premium. Any further overspill of additional vehicles from this development and from the visitors there will add greatly to the congestion in the area around the secondary school. The apartments proposed are 3 stories high and are not in keeping with the character of the area or the street scene, policies BB and CC of the street scene, and also contravene the adopted Cranleigh design statement. The access to one of the sites is down Dewlands Lane. This is a typical country lane, narrow in places and with no continuous pavement, making it dangerous for pedestrians, especially the many students who walk along it to and from school. It also has the Cranleigh Fire Station in it and the cemetery at the end of the road. To add to the congestion in this area, there is a new shop at the end of Dewlands Lane, where shoppers park their cars on the double yellow lines in Ewhurst Lane Road while doing their shopping. The other site's access is from Parsonage Road, which has very serious congestion at the beginning and the end of the school day, not only from cars, but also from buses. Waverley Borough Council has declared a climate emergency and said it will work with town and parish councils to create a greener, more sustainable and environmentally friendly borough. This planning application that's before you tonight will result in the loss of 1 hectare of playing fields and gardens across the 2 sites, and 50% of the trees. The loss of the playing fields will contravene the 6-acre rule from the Surrey Playing Fields Association, and will result in Cranleigh not having enough playing fields for the number of residents. Additionally, part of the development is identified as being in flood zone 3, and the primary upper school has a large area within this zone and therefore fails the consequential test. So, for the lack of detail on the amended planning application, the design of the dwellings and the risk to our environment, Cranleigh Parish Council asks the committee to refuse this application. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. The final public speaker is Mrs. McLaughlin. That's it. It's on now. That's it.
Good evening, Chairman, Councillors. I'm Joy McLaughlin, Associate Director, WIG. Thank you for giving WIG the opportunity to speak for the applicants. The reason this application comes before you is to provide the funds for a modern, larger, fit-for-purpose primary school for the benefit of the children in the Cranleigh area. Without this development, the current situation where the school operates from split sites in outmoded buildings would have to continue. Apart from providing education infrastructure, the development proposed will be socially, economically and environmentally beneficial to Cranleigh for the following reasons. It will provide a high-quality, sustainable residential development in the heart of Cranleigh within walking distance of shops, schools and services. 91 new homes, of which 27 will be affordable, including 6 two-bedroom homes at social rents. It will provide a sport mitigation package secured by legal agreement, which includes a new 3G AG pitch on Gleebland Secondary School, community use of the 3G AG pitch, the existing grass playing fields and changing facilities. It will provide improved connectivity between Cranleigh High Street and northern parts of the village via new footpath links, public footpath links. There will be managed on-site open space with an equipped children's play area on the larger site. The illustrative layout includes the retention of the majority of existing trees around boundaries, also protecting bat foraging areas. Extensive consultation has been undertaken with all stakeholders since 2015, including a public exhibition, meetings with Waverley Planning and Urban Design officers, with Cranleigh Neighbourhood Plan Steering Group, with the Environment Agency, County Highway Authority and Sport England. In terms of local policy, the proposals comply with the development plan and with the emerging draft neighbourhood plan. The principle of residential use on the sites is acceptable. The sites accord with spatial strategy policy SP2, falling within the developed area of Cranleigh and on a predominantly brownfield site. The sites are included in Part 1 of the Waverley Borough Local Plan 2018 and are allocated for residential use in the draft Cranleigh Neighbourhood Plan. The loss of educational use on the current sites has been demonstrated to be acceptable by the re-provision of the primary school and facilities on surplus land at Gleebland Secondary School, to be secured by legal obligation complying with policy ICS1. A sport mitigation package has been agreed with Sport England, which will address the loss of the grass playing fields on the upper school site and comply with policy LRC 1C. The 3G AGP to be funded is a key aspiration of the Waverley Borough Playing Pitch Strategy. The Environment Agency have no objection to the proposals and the scheme complies with policy CC4, agreeing that the sites fall within flood zone 1 following the outcome of hydraulic modelling exercise. 30% affordable housing homes are proposed to meet local need in compliance with policy AHN1. The scheme is submitted in outline with all matters reserved except access. Siting and appearance would be addressed under reserved matters applications, but the illustrative layout demonstrates it could be developed in an acceptable and attractive manner. The use of Julian's Lane rather than Church Lane to access the former infant school site is necessary to make use of the most suitable highway. Church Lane is narrow with few passing places and restricted by walls hard up against the road edge, having poor visibility along its length. The Highway Authority are satisfied with the proposed access arrangements, and the highway network can accommodate both residential development and the new primary school safely. Consultation with stakeholders has resulted in many improvements to the proposals, including a reduction in housing numbers from 98 to 91. The development proposal complies with the development plan policies. For all these reasons, we respectfully ask you to agree with your officer recommendation and grant planning permission for this well-designed scheme, which will deliver many benefits to Cranleigh. Thank you.
Thank you. Final speaker is Councillor Ellis as the ward member, so you have your 4 minutes. Then you can come back later.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very aware of the most dreadfully poor condition of this Cranleigh C of E primary school buildings and the almost desperate need for replacement that would actually be enabled by the development of the two sites. However, I'm afraid that I must object most strongly to the outline plans for the two sites, and in particular for the proposals for the upper school site, which appears to me to be an overdevelopment of the site with a very high density of dwellings. I support the views of Cranleigh Parish Council that the height of the apartments would not be in keeping with the character of the area or the street scene, and would contravene the Cranleigh design statement that has been adopted by Waverley Borough Council. I believe that the site regularly suffers from an excess of surface water and is prone to flooding, which does not lend itself safely to development of such a high-density development with very significantly increased covered areas of what was previously grassland. This is an outline planning permission, but the parking facilities seem to me to be totally inadequate, probably leaving to bumper parking on the roadside, difficulties for passing vehicles and problems with deliveries. During term time, and I think this is really vital, the traffic in the area is an absolute nightmare for everyone concerned, with traffic for the Glebland Senior and much larger school directly opposite, and another primary school fairly close by on the same narrow road. The traffic, including school coaches accessing the proposed new replacement schools, will continue to be in the immediate vicinity. And added to this horrendous situation will be the traffic associated with along with the vehicular access from 74 new properties. I believe for the safety of the residents and our children, we must look to the cumulative effect on traffic in the vicinity of the proposed developments. The access to the existing lower school is totally unacceptable. Julian's Lane leads past the fire station and through to the Cranleigh Cemetery and is extremely narrow with a lack of continuous pavement that would be potentially very dangerous for all pedestrians walking in the narrow road, especially for those perhaps elderly people who have been visiting the cemetery and those with young children and pushchairs, etc. And we should not ignore the safety and increased difficulties that would be experienced by the number of residents who already live in the lane. Due to a bend in the Ewhurst Road and the very limited sight lines, it is difficult to turn out of Julian's Lane, and this is often made worse by the vehicles illegally parked opposite on double yellow lines. I do feel very, very strongly that this application is an inappropriate development that is contrary to the borough local plan by virtue of its significant and harmful impact on the visual and residential amenities. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Okay, open for discussion. Any member wish to comment? Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I'd just would like to clarify the position of the Cranleigh Neighbourhood Plan. As I said, that this is a site in the neighbourhood plan, these two sites. However, the neighbourhood plan, as most people will know who do neighbourhood plans, has been going on for some time. And this application for the new school opposite has also been going on for some time. And it was considered that, and it was accepted that a decision on the school would have been made by the time the neighbourhood plan came to into adoption. However, it's clear in the neighbourhood plan on these sites there is a condition that they are only acceptable should the new school have been given acceptable planning permission already. So there is a caveat on the neighbourhood plan. I have to concur with Councillor Ellis. The traffic in the area is particularly bad, and I am concerned about the loss of some of the lay-bys outside of what is the existing school site in Parsonage Road. Apparently they are going to be reduced to allow access to this new site, which we are considering tonight. Access is included. And that will create more pressure on parking in Parsonage Road. We have the prospect of Gleeblands being an increased, in forthcoming years, increasing in size already, and the proposed new school, which I don't think the transport survey takes into full account. The new school, primary school, will be a bigger school, and as has been said, it will be merging the two schools onto one site, and it will have a big nursery in there as well. So it will be concentrating a lot of new traffic into Parsonage Road as well as for this development. So I have concerns. There have been road safety issues in this area, and although they're deemed to be acceptable, allegedly, it doesn't take into account the parking pressure in this area with the new school site and this housing as well. Much has been said as well about the access to Dewlands, which is a very narrow. The picture that was on the officer's presentation made Dewlands Lane look quite large, but it's actually very narrow. You can't really pass two cars there, let alone the fire engine and a car as well. I also have a couple of other points, as you might be not surprised, on the bat surveys on the site. These are out of date. It says within the Surrey Wildlife Trust that they need to be redone again. The surveys only lasted for 2 years. It said 2 years. That was 2014, I think, from memory. So they are out of date now. So, you know, is that something that we should be keeping an eye on and be concerned about, the wildlife on this site? I'm also concerned about the changing of the pre-commencement condition for Thames Water, to say that, you know, because of the lack of water supply, Thames Water wanted a pre-commencement condition and we're making it a pre-occupation. We're in a time of climate emergency. We really need to be careful about how much pressure we are putting on our water systems, and I really think that should be kept to a pre-commencement condition. Also, the loss of trees on this site. We're going to lose 37 individual trees and 4 groups of trees. Surely this is outline. Why are we looking at the loss of trees at this stage? We don't even know what the actual application is going to look like. I do not accept the loss of these trees at this stage. So that is all I've got to say at this point. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Coburn.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I think Councillor Townsend has really answered my question, because I wanted clarification on the Cranleigh Neighbourhood Plan. I read it before I came to this meeting because it was raised, and I know what Cran 4 and Cran 5 say, and I know, having done the same thing in Farnham, that normally when you've got a site in, you know, these matters have been dealt with and that these sites are considered suitable. Obviously, at reserve matters stage, then you get into much more detail, but I do take the point that if things slip through at outline stage, then we can't put them right at the reserve matters stage, and certainly any loss of trees. I think we should resist that at this stage. I certainly wouldn't condone that. But I was very confused after what Councillor Ellis said, because, as I say, to me, if it's a site allocation, we are looking at it as favourably as we can, albeit what we want on that site ultimately is something that fits in with the design guidance in the MPPF and all the paragraphs there, 127 onwards, and in obviously our own local plan, but also in the Cranleigh neighbourhood plan. So I can understand wanting to make sure that nothing slips through at this stage, but I can't understand why this is not an acceptable site, because why is it in the neighbourhood plan if it hasn't been walked over and looked at? All the sites in most neighbourhood plans, I assume people have walked around every inch of it, because that's what you're doing when you're looking at a site suitability. So I'm grateful to Councillor Townsend for clarifying that, because I was completely confused after Councillor Ellis. Thank you very much.
Councillor Cotter.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm generally in support of the officer's recommendation on this. I think we've got to look at the basics here. Clearly, although it's not directly our concern, that the school desperately needs new accommodation. I think as far as housing is concerned, it is designated as an appropriate site. It's a site that is appropriate. It makes a significant contribution with 27 affordable houses, and I think there must be a presumption in favour. I am sympathetic to what one of the speakers said about the traffic in the area. Unfortunately, the problem around traffic twice a day around schools probably exists in relation to almost every school in Surrey. And I wish I knew what the answer was. Very occasionally you can try site-specific measures, but the traffic then seems to expand to actually obviate whatever measures you've put in place. The reality is that most of these schools were designed at a time when car ownership was nowhere near what it is now. Now, maybe in times to come, we can encourage people. We're trying things now. Maybe we can do better things to encourage them not to use their cars, but I don't see we can use that substantively to block this proposal. I had two issues, though, interestingly, both raised by Councillor Townsend, that I did want to raise and get some advice on. I was concerned about the issue of the lay-by outside the school, which we looked at, and we did look at, and I was thinking about and discussing tentatively with other councillors on the site visit about whether there would be any opportunity to put some, whether it's for the here or later, I'll take advice on, Chairman, some condition that would enable those to be retained, because it would at least provide some relief. I also was I wanted to ask the question about the loss of trees as well. Is it appropriate at this stage to accept that, or is that something we should wait until we have the reserved matters and detailed design in front of us? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Follows.
Thank you, Chair. Again, Councillor Townsend and others have mentioned some of the questions that I was going to ask, and in practice I'm also wary about being burnt by having an outline application put some of these things through, because effectively we've all sat here and had that frustrating time where it's agreed an outline and we're therefore bound to it. I have a few questions on this regarding the social element of the housing, the market rate at about is it 40% or 60%? The last speaker did confirm that it was 6 2-bedrooms at social rate, although I couldn't find that anywhere in the report, so I just wanted to double check that was in fact the case. Another aspect of it being in outline that worries me, because the statement after it says it'll be dealt with in reserved matters, but it's the 1-bedroom houses that are below the technical floor space standards. And yes, the rest of it is predominantly regarding things like the tree removals and other areas which I do worry about being in the outline. So if I could just have some response on those, that'd be great. Thank you.
Councillor Dinas.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and keep it very brief. I was going to talk about the affordable housing. Page 69 is the point where the 1-bedroom house, which is going to be 50 metres square rather than 58. So that's 1-bedroom house, and if you turn to page 48, 1-bedroom we have 6 market and 13. Are we saying 19 premises are going to fail to meet the standard? And if so, is that not discriminating against the people who need affordable housing? Because I don't think any of the other housing's below the minimum standard. So it's a question and an observation, I suppose, in one.
Do you want to comment on that now, or do we leave it to... Are you finished, Councillor Denis?
I'll wait for the answer to see whether there's a follow-on.
Okay.
Yes, apologies that the inclusion of that matter within the report has caused some confusion. The precise floor space standards for each unit isn't defined at this outline stage. It's a layout matter, which comes later down the line at reserve matter stage. What we need to do at outline stage is to ensure that, in terms of the principle of having that number of units on the site, that it is possible. But we don't need to secure sort of the specific floor space for individual units. So, for example, if you had a scheme where all of the units were 10% under on floor space, and you knew that if the resultant increase in floor space and built footprint would result in a site which looked very much overdeveloped, then you might have a concern at outline stage. But generally it's taken as a reserved matter stage overall, and given that the deficiency in the indicative scheme is only really very insignificant in terms of the scheme overall, there isn't a concern at outline stage, but that issue has been flagged to the applicant as something that we would like to see addressed at reserve matter stage.
If I just can come back very, very quickly then, accepting it as like an indicative scheme. My comment, if permission was granted and you were speaking to the developers, it looks more like Butlins Holiday Homes than Cranleigh. There's absolutely no style, nothing nice about it. And I think very strongly you should be saying that we would expect minimum standards, because if they came back to us and it was a full, with the actual measurements, then we might come back and say no. So if nothing else, I think it needs to be fed back to them.
Okay, I'm sure we will do that. Councillor Edmonds.
Thank you, Chair. It's a question. Has any air quality measurements been taken in the area, considering the large amount of congestion that appears to be present there? Thank you.
Is there any immediate answer on that one? I know there has been measurements made in the Cranleigh area, but...
No measurements have been undertaken specifically in relation to this case, but our environmental health team have reviewed the application and not raised an objection on that ground. In terms of the application which is before us for the residential development, in terms of traffic generation, this would be significantly reduced from the existing school situation. Whilst the cumulative impact of the multiple developments in this area, including re-providing both schools within the Gleebland site, would increase in overall in an additional traffic generation, that's not necessarily an issue for consideration in this application, as this is purely the residential element which has a reduced impact in terms of vehicle movements.
Councillor Dixon.
Yes, just to say that I think that at the outline stage, to agree to this high density of housing is probably not very wise, because I think the number might be seen as the minimum as opposed to the maximum. So I really think we shouldn't be agreeing to this number, which is clearly going to be out of character with the town centre. And I also feel that to say that the loss of 37 trees is not significant at this stage is just, it just takes your breath away. And also I'd like to point out, I think there is an error at the bottom of the second paragraph on page 67, where you say of the 4 groups to be removed, 2 groups are category B and 2 groups are category B. So there's also an error in the documents we've been provided with. So I really feel this is not a good indicative outline stage plan.
Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm inclined to agree with the last speaker. I think that the density of the houses proposed here is too many. But at the same time, I also think that really this is the cart before the horse. If we knew what that the primary school was proposing and where the parking in that primary school area was set for drop-off and pick-up, it would make it much easier for us to decide whether this is appropriate. Yeah, I would like to see the total number of houses at this point reduced on the basis that when it came back again, a case could be made for an increase in the number of houses if that was actually justified on viability terms. So I would like to suggest that we only approve probably 85 houses on this site, and that would then deal with that. We could also, under the recommendation, where it says provision of an appropriate replacement educational facility, off-site play area, we could add parking for pick-up and drop-off, and then as goes on to say, and playing pitch improvements. Now, if it was an all-weather type pitch facility or a fortified piece of ground which can also have grass on it or artificial surface, then that could be used for parking during the pick-up and drop-off period and for sports at the rest of the time. So that's what I would suggest in that situation.
The application, thank you. The application in front of us is for how many houses it is. I think we have to live with that in terms of determined on that basis. But
thank you, Chairman. I hear what you're saying, and I understand why you're saying it. What I would say is the application is for the number of dwellings that it is proposed. It is not for members to redesign or say what works and what doesn't work. What is before you is what you are considering, and that's my advice. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Beeman.
Yes. Thank you very much, Chair. I have to say that for an outline planning application, there's a hell of a lot of conditions here attached to it in my book, and yet, and then there's all these changes which leave me a bit confused, I have to admit. I would say that even though there's so many conditions, is there a condition about vehicle charging points? Actually, vehicle charging points in there? That's an issue. And the other thing I would say, on the pickup signs to the left, I believe they're on the opposite side of the parsonage road as to the school. So are you saying that the kids would have to cross the road on these drop-off points?
Do you want to answer that point?
Thank you, Chairman. If I could just answer the first point with respect to the electric vehicle charging points. Members will be aware of their adopted policy, CC2 of the local plan. If members were minded to agree with the officer's recommendation, we could impose an informative reminding the applicant of the requirements of the policy CC2, which seeks to ensure, amongst other things, the requirement of 110 litres of water per day, the provision of highest available speed broadband infrastructure, and the provision of electric vehicle charging points. Thank you. I'll just pass over to Kate for the other section.
Thank you, Councillor Beam. In relation to the drop-off bays for the school for school buses, that for the re-provided school, that is, that's not a matter for consideration on this application. The duty will be with Surrey County Council as the local planning authority for the application for the new primary school to determine it. The way we consider this application in transportation terms in relation to that proposed application is in relation to the cumulative impacts on traffic generation that may be likely to happen. But in terms of the detail of the travel plan for the school, that will be something that lies with Surrey Highways Authority, and it will equally be something which can be controlled by a travel plan, which it isn't currently. Thank you.
Councillor Else.
Thank you, Chairman. As Councillor Follows said just now, on this joint planning committee, we've all been bitten by these outline applications before and these indicative layouts, and it all looks very pretty on the plan, and we agree to 91 units, and then when the reserve matters come back, everything's been squeezed a bit more, the units are a bit bigger. If we're going to insist on these units meeting the accepted space standards, then that's going to take up more of the built form. Reference has been made by the Parish Council and by Councillor Ellis to 3-storey apartments in the middle. If we're going to insist on it being no more than 2 stories, then again those units have got to be found somewhere else on the site, because sure as eggs is eggs, if we grant 91 units, they're not going to accept 88 or 89 or 90. They're going to want their 91. So I'm very concerned, not so much on the one that's on the screen now, but the larger site certainly seems very, very crammed in, and it's just not very imaginative, and it's, as somebody said, it's going to be more like Butlins than a Cranleigh housing development. So I'm finding it hard to agree with officers at the moment, but I wait to hear what my colleagues say.
Councillor Gray.
Thank you. I'm going to ask one of my naive questions again. It was clear in here that we are saying we want to link this to the provision of a replacement school, and we're going to condition that. And if we're going to condition that, and we're going to link it to the school, then it would be perfectly reasonable and understandable for a person like myself to say we should take into account the traffic from both this and the linked school. Perhaps officers could tell me why there's a flaw in my logic.
Could you address that point, please? Yeah.
In relation to the application, yes, I appreciate that the development of this site would be dependent upon, in planning terms, securing a new school. That's considered in transportation terms through the transport statement, which has a section on what we call cumulative impact, which is where you look at all the developments which are foreseen as expected developments within an area and look at the traffic generation there. In relation to this application, that's what the Highways Authority have done, and they've found that the impacts on traffic aren't considered to be so significant as to have a detrimental impact on the highway safety and efficiency. In terms of how the re-provision of the school is actually secured, we're proposing that that's via a legal agreement, and the relevant legal agreement clause would say that this development cannot be commenced until that re-provision had taken place. There's no need for the legal agreement to link it necessarily specifically to the existing application that is with Surrey County Council for the new school on the Gleebland site, but whatever happens with the re-provision of the school, the legal agreement would ensure that this consent would not be implemented without that taking place, because it wouldn't be acceptable in planning terms without that taking place. Thank you.
We've had quite a lot of speakers here, and some people applying to get to speak again. So can we... no, we've got to draw to a conclusion. But Councillor James.
Thank you, Chairman. I've also got slight concerns, because it does say on one of them, although I think Councillor Ells said that the infant school site he was quite sort of more happy with, but actually that one says on page 67 that there's a tree that actually might prevent plot 8, well, actually should prevent plot 89 even being built, because it says that there'll be unreasonable light levels and it might be a pressure to remove the tree. And then on the next page, it says, subject to all the sort of conditions, it provides good positions between the retained trees and the built form, so as not to prevent any future pressure on the tree removal. Well, I'm afraid I just don't agree. Therefore, I'm not happy with the amount of housing at the moment with the trees that are there, if we have to then remove all the trees. So they need to come back with the appropriate amount of houses without removing the trees, and then perhaps we could look at it. Thank you.
I've got Councillor Hess, and can we try and bring us to conclusion, please? I will go back to two speakers who have been waiting for some time, but let's try and bring us to conclusion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There are a few things that make me a bit nervous about this. It's really to do with flood risk, because it says that Thames Water have advised that existing water supply infrastructure has insufficient capacity to meet the demands for the proposed development. And also, in terms of discharge of surface water runoff, it would go from the site to a sewer that runs through the fire station. Although not listed in Thames Water asset records, it's understood that this sewer transferred into public ownership in 2011 connects to a downstream public sewer, and it's possible that the surface water sewer discharges directly into Little Mead Brook, which is a private water sewer. Now, that's the same brook, I think, that was in the nursing home application, and there was a concern about potential impact on water voles in that watercourse. So all of that to do with the water supply question and the discharge of surface water concern me a lot. I don't know whether officers could comment on that. Thank you.
Is there anything we can say on that point?
Yes, well, in relation to the flood risk of the site and surface water drainage, the local flood authority have now no objection, and in relation to both sites, there would be the possibility to provide sustainable urban drainage systems, which there aren't currently, which may well improve the runoff rates. In relation to the water supply infrastructure and Thames Water's comments, and specifically the issue of the drainage system for surface water, it's the existing situation. It's not going to be worsened from the existing situation. It may well be that a development would result in more green space within people's gardens rather than the existing significant areas of hard standing and play space within the infant school site. And I believe that covers everything you asked about. Thank you.
Okay, I've got 3 members who want to speak for a second time, so if you really, not another 4 minutes, please. Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to come back. Some very, very quickly, just there is no drop-off point proposed for the new school, and that is one of the major issues with this development. There's no drop-off point. Why does this actual site need 2 access roads if it only had 1 access road into it, which in Cranleigh we've got housing estates with 250 over that houses with 1 access road? Why does this need 2? It could improve the actual amount of parking, lay-by parking outside for the coaches, which have to double park at the moment anyway. So that is, I would also say the lead local flood authority don't look at wildlife studies at all, so they don't care, and we haven't got the bat surveys are not up to date. So to be honest, I would have liked to have seen this developer come forward to the neighbourhood plan and work with the neighbourhood plan to work with our policies and to come forward with a development that tried to accommodate a little bit more parking on Parsonage Road, and also to work with Surrey County Council, who just refuse point blank to provide any drop-off point for the new school. And if you're concerned about Surrey Highways, why they aren't commenting, the road is accessed, the new school will be accessed by a private road, a little narrow, tiny private road, which Surrey County Council Highways do not comment on private roads. It is a disaster. It wasn't what was envisaged when we put the site in the neighbourhood plan. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Councillor Coburn. Same restriction, please.
Yes, no, very quickly, it was just to say that we have to be a little bit careful on number, because the neighbourhood plan, which is part, or we hope is going to be part of the development plan, does allocate approximately 90. But for all the reasons other people have mentioned, that doesn't necessarily make this a good application.
And Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Chairman. It's just a clarification. If officers are prepared to put in to this recommendation a statement about having parking pickup points inside the school grounds for the new school, where they've got off-site play area, off-site pickup parking, and carrying on with play pitch improvement.
Not clear. We can condition the other application. Do you want to comment, please? Please.
Sorry, yes, thank you, Chair. We couldn't add that into the recommendation for this application to be secured in the legal agreement, simply because the new school proposal is not what's before us, and the new school isn't immediately adjacent to the existing site. It is in the vicinity of it, but it's not so close that matter could be secured. And equally, it won't, in planning terms, there isn't a requirement for the school to be re-provided within the Gleveland site necessarily. So that isn't something which comes within the remit of this application or the matters for consideration. Thank you.
Even though we've got these other comments in the recommendation about what the school should provide.
So they're not comments about what the school should provide, they're comments about what the housing development site should provide, including the re-provision of a new school. But in terms of the transportation considerations for that school and the acceptability of drop-off, it doesn't come within this application. As I've said previously, if consent is granted by Surrey County Council for a new school, that school would be subject to a travel plan, which would be tied up in a legal agreement, which isn't the existing situation. So there would be a significant opportunity for improvements there in any case, which may well reduce the demand for private vehicle trips to the school. Thank you.
So, Councillor Ellis, you have an opportunity to come back and make any points you wish to make. Thank you very much. Okay. In which case we can move to the vote. Now, I'll read out the recommendation, which has been somewhat modified. So the recommendation the recommendation is that, subject to the applicant entering into appropriate legal agreement within 6 months of the date of the committee resolution to grant planning permission to secure affordable housing, provision of an appropriate replacement education facility, off-site play area and playing pitch improvements, off-site community facility improvements and on-site SUDs and open space management maintenance and subject to conditions 1 to 27 with amended conditions 3, 4, 8, 18, 19 and 21, deletion of conditions 13, 14 and 15 and informatives 1 to 7, permission be granted. So that's the motion. Okay.
That's informative. Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, right. So we are ready to vote, I believe. Can we?
Yep.
So it's so the motion is to be it's green for permission to be granted, red to refuse permission.
So there's 2 in favour, 1 abstention, 19 against.
Okay, so permission has been refused. So I'll need a motion for refusal. Is that correct?
Yeah, if someone wants
Yeah.
to,
So someone propose that the application be refused, please. Councillor Isherwood, seconder. Councillor Coven, thank you. And the release some reasons as well. Proposal for what the reasons for refusal should be. Anyone?
Is it simply overdevelopment?
Overdevelopment against the Cranleigh design statement with 3-storey buildings involved. Loss of trees. Floor space minimum standards. Well, no, that's not really part of it, is it? No.
So far, I've heard overdevelopment against... Sorry, you've been noting them down. Right.
Sorry, Chairman, can I just remind members that they are considering the principle of development, including access, but no other reserved matters. So elements such as design, layout are not before members for consideration, so can't constitute reasons for refusal. Thank you, Chairman.
So overdevelopment, does that remain a a reason? Overdevelopment's okay, yes.
Overdevelopment's fine, yes.
Loss of trees, yeah.
Unnecessary access, we can do that.
Did you have a suggestion, Councillor Tanton? You seem to be indicating.
I would just like to say, could we put in anything about the loss of drop-off point outside the school and the actual access that we don't find the access acceptable?
Not from the school. We can't have the school, can we?
And also the wildlife studies as well.
In terms of the drop-off points, the diagram did, for my mind, didn't indicate where the boundary of the site was properly, whether it actually overlaid the existing drop-off area. So, I mean, that was unclear. Whether that's a reason for refusal, I don't know. But
have we got words? Any words? We've got 4, haven't we? Gone. Catherine.
Kate, yes.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, you've cited four reasons there, being overdevelopment, loss of trees, a highways reason for refusal, and biodiversity. If I can just offer some words of advice with regards to the highways reason for refusal. The application is not subject to a technical objection by the County Highway Authority, who are our technical experts in that respect. Regardless of your individual thoughts on the County Highway Authority, they are the expert opinion. Officers here do not have the technical expertise to assess that information. So it is a risk to the council to refuse a planning application on a technical matter such as highways, contrary to the advice that you have received from your experts at the County Highway Authority. That is just a word of caution. It is up to members to make the decision, but I am offering those words of caution. I think Kate perhaps can come back to us on the biodiversity reason for refusal, so I will hand over to Kate. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, thank you. In relation to the additional surveys, they are not up on the website, unfortunately, but additional surveys were submitted in around summer 2018, which in effect updated the surveys which had previously been submitted. The walkover survey found that one of the buildings had deteriorated slightly in terms of condition, such that it could potentially be now be a suitable environment for bats. So on the basis of that, a dusk emergence survey was carried out, and that didn't find any evidence of bats. So on that basis, the survey information is from 2018. So equally, I would caution against that as a separate refusal reason, as those surveys have been submitted. Thank you.
Councillor Coburn, did you have a suggestion for?
Well, yes, I mean, I appreciate what we're being told about highways, but there's obviously concerns about access, the access that's been chosen, and, you know, people have said that maybe that's not the correct one. If we're not allowed to turn it down on access, can we at least put in an informative about talking to the community about access to the new builds? Because, you know, that obviously is a concern, and if, as Councillor Townsend said, there's been no community engagement on this, then I think we should be putting something in our report to say so.
You want to make a suggestion?
Can I just offer some alternative advice with regards to the access highways issue? As far as I understand it, the main concerns of members focus around these drop-off points, which will serve the consolidated school sites combined with the traffic associated with the housing scheme. My advice stands that I would counsel against you objecting to the scheme on a technical highway matter. However, there is the matter of general inconvenience and amenity that arises from parking and traffic generation in an area. If you would prefer to go down that route, I would advise that is a safer route to have a reason for refusal focused on inconvenience to other in the area and general amenity concerns associated with congestion associated with the school, but that would steer you away from a technical objection on highway grounds. That may be a safer option, but again, that is for members to make that decision. Thank you.
Councillor Edmonds, did you want to have? I'm just looking for ideas for projection here.
I couldn't support the application because of the elected members' obligations under the health and safety policy and the air quality standards regulations 2010. I needed to know that the air quality would not be aggravated to such an extent that it would harm school children. That was the reason for my objection.
Councillor Isherwood, you were indicating as.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Continuing from what Councillor Coburn was saying, we are looking at the outline application for the erection of 91 dwellings and the provision of new and altered access, and that's what we're objecting to.
Councillor Townsend.
I was just taking from what the officers just said about the car parking. Could that then be included in there about and the car parking, the impact on the character of the area as well, in that obviously parked cars and more parked cars everywhere is obviously impactful on the character of the area? Thank you.
We have a consolidated list of the points from the officers. So, Kat,
yeah,
can you?
I can clarify. So I would suggest a reason, the proposal by reason of the number of units proposed would result in an overdevelopment of the site to the detriment of the character and amenity of the surrounding area, contrary to policies TD1 of the 2018 plan, D1, D4 of the 2002 plan and the Cranleigh Village Design Statement. Loss of trees, a proposal would be likely to result in the loss of trees on site to the detriment of the character and amenity of the area, contrary to policy TD1 of the local plan and policies D1, D4, D6 and D7 of the local plan 2002. The highways reason for refusal, the proposal by reason of in-combination effects in relation to schools in the area could lead to inconvenience and harms to the visual amenities of the surrounding areas, contrary to policy TD1 of the 2018 plan, D1, D4 of the 2002 plan and the Cranleigh Village Design Statement. Did we get a conclusion on biodiversity? Not recently.
I don't suggest we include
those
biodiversity.
three?
I think that seems to me to be enough.
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, so you've heard the proposed list of objections, so we need to vote on whether reasons for objection. So we need to vote on whether we accept the motion to refuse on that basis. So Green is to support the motion to refuse on the basis of the reasons we just heard. So if you can please vote.
That's 24 refusal and 2 abstentions.
Okay, thank you very much. That completes that item. We make it quick. Last time, too long time.
Yes, of course. Yeah, no, you've had some.
Thank you very much.
See you on the 16th.
And Zach, I promise you the electronics aren't normally this bad. Oh yeah, great. Thank you.
See you later.
See you.
Cheers,
Um,
Yes, that's it.
Just 2 minutes, please.
We'll announce that.
We're pausing very quickly just for comfort break, so but please don't wander too far off.
I was just looking for the timing issue on here. Let's see if I can get hold of it.
Give me the last one.
There is, yeah, what I'll do is I'll quickly go and get the red card. Oh, yeah. I'll just go and get the card. Let's kill off everyone over 75. Frankly, we can give a hand out, you know, to get to the point.
So there's not big speakers,
We've got no speed, yes, we've got no...
No, but it's a reserve matter for, you know, I'm agreeing.
I mean, I'm working on the assumption that this one's going to take way past the 10 o'clock. I can't believe we'll do this one.
I think this one could be fairly quick, but I think this one I hope will be fairly quick. This is the third one, but I don't disagree that we're running out of time to do the reserve match.
What do you reckon? Is there a... crack on?
Yes.
Try and get it.
I don't know how much will be said about the fourth one.
That's the key, isn't it? It's a big reserve matters application.
Everyone wants to talk about detail.
Well, yes, it will be detailed because it's reserved. So it'll be a big... Yeah, it's huge. Yeah, no, it's really big.
Can we try and restart, please? Go and please resume their seats.
It's just that there might be people in the gallery. Pardon? It's, you do.
I do, yeah.
Let me just find the wording, because I just think it says... It's basically, we can either stop at 10 o'clock, or we can carry on with the whole agenda, or we can complete this item and we close it then to be adjourned to a date to be.
Stop at 10.
Stop at 10, complete the agenda, or adjourn after this item to be continued at a date to be confirmed. I just think otherwise there's going to be people here possibly.
Okay, so it's been pointed out that we're running. We have two more items to go. We have only, it's now 9:30. So unfortunately, we can't find the magic red card, so which has the motion all written down. But we have three options, members. One is to stop at 10 o'clock, dead. The second is to complete the agenda, as tabled. And the third is to adjourn after this next item. That's to say the item on the land at West Cranleigh Nurseries. So those are the three options.
Sorry, if we adjourn...
I'm sorry, excuse me. Yes, I did not read out the motion fully.
Sorry.
Yes, you found it.
Apologies, I found it in the Constitution. So there is the options that the Chairman's just said. So we can finish at 10 o'clock. We can agree to a half-hour extension to 10:30, at which at that point we would stand adjourned, so we might be halfway through an item. We can continue the meeting until we've concluded the business, or we can adjourn a meeting, but at the meeting that will be arranged at a time to be confirmed. At that adjourned meeting, no business other than that set out in the agenda, so the fourth item would be considered at that adjourned meeting. So at the moment we haven't got a date for that meeting. But
so it would not be rolled into the next JPC. It would be at a separate meeting to be arranged.
It would be a separate meeting,
Right.
and we'd do it as soon as we can.
I propose that we finish the item 6.3, land at West Cranleigh Nurseries, adjourn to a date to be agreed, but soon, to consider just the item for land on the west side of Green Lane. So that's proposal. Is there a seconder for that proposal? There are seconders, right?
I think we just take it.
So, actually, by hand or?
Just by hand.
Okay, so indicate by hand, please, those in favour of that motion. Any against?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 against.
Okay.
Got 17 for.
Okay, that's carried. Okay, we carry on then with the next item, which is item 6.3, land at West Cranleigh Nurseries. Do you have someone to present that? Okay. Sorry, there's some. Go, yep, go.
Thank you, Chair. This application is for all remaining reserved matters for Site A pursuant to the Outline Planning Commission WA 2016-2207 to provide a 22.8 hectare country park, including the provision of associated car parking, cycle parking, public toilets, play equipment. So you can see here, this is the site location plan. On the left, it shows you the three sites. We have Site A, which is the country park site, which is under consideration today. Site B and Site C, which are 265 dwellings subject to reserve matters applications yet to be decided. So the application site is located south of the main built-up area of Cranleigh, and to the north there is some further development sites, some under construction. So these are some site photos taken of a more aerial view. So you can see the Bruce Mackenzie playing field is just here. Knoll Lane comes like down the side of the site here. This is orientated a different way to the previous map. And then the site boundary runs alongside the footpath here. The Littlemy Brook River runs along the middle of the site here, and then the further site boundary is along the back here. The site's Knoll Park Care Home is situated here also, and the site slopes down. It's like a slight gradient here. Again, just another view. So the proposal before members today is for the detailed design of the country park, which comprises a access off of Knoll Lane, a car park for 55 spaces plus 5 disabled spaces, a public toilet block just here, an adventure play area in this area here, and then public footpath. There's a decked area here, a lakeside amphitheatre or performance area, lots of paths that go along here. This is the existing footpath running through the centre of the site, which is to be upgraded to a public bridleway. It'll be widened and resurfaced. There is an area of ancient woodland here with a TPO blanket across the entire site, and it's proposed to put a small path into this so that it becomes a usable space, but not so much to cause any detriment to the ancient woodland. There is a small area of overflow car parking here, which is not to be used on a formal, regular basis, but mainly in association with any kind of larger events on the site. And then there is a lower informal performance area with terrace grass banking around this area here. I think that's it. So the whole site is countryside beyond the green belt. And like I said, there's existing development to the north and to the west of the site, with the care home to the south. So this is just some zoomed in visuals. You can see the Littlemy Brook here, which is left unchanged, and the car park just down here. This is the lower area with the small area of overflow car parking, and then the path down to the lower grass banked amphitheatre. This is the public toilet building, which has been proposed. Materials subject to condition. And then this is a imposed CGI kind of image of what the parkland would look like. So you can see the amphitheatre down here, the lakeside amphitheatre, the lake, the car park, and the adventure play area. So there's the planting of additional trees, hedges, and meadows, ecology enhancements, and the upgrading of the public footpath, the new artificial lake, and the performance areas, car park, and parkland parks and tracks, and the play area. That's about it. So the matters for your consideration would be the impact on the countryside and visual amenity of the area, impact on the residential amenity of the nearby residential dwellings, impact on trees, flooding and drainage considerations, biodiversity and sustainability implications, access highways and parking. There is one written update which you had the pleasure of looking at, which is to do with condition 16 of the outline consent of the 2016 application, whereby further information was submitted by the applicant to address concerns raised in regard to condition 16 discharge as part of the application. The Environment Agency has had a review of this and raised no objections to the discharge of that condition via this application in front of you. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, we have two speakers. The first is Councillor Nigel Sanctuary of Cranleigh Parish Council. So you have 4 minutes.
Thank you for this opportunity. I will be making this this speech on behalf of Cranleigh Parish Council. Overall, there was no objection to the Knoll Park initiative to develop a country park on 22.8 hectares of land west of Cranleigh Nurseries and north of Knoll Park between Knoll Lane and Alfold Road. This was driven by a majority view from councillors that the park will provide a welcome addition to the village amenities, a sentiment reflected in the 12 letters from neighbourhood residents. The Parish Council reviewed the planning documents and environmental assessments from the amended planning application, noting that no protected species are likely to be affected by the development of the nature park, and that more diverse wildlife is to be attracted by virtue of the layout and planting in the park. Some concern was expressed in discussions at the Parish Council planning meeting that the widening of the footpath 393 into a bridleway and its paving in materials designed to mitigate pedestrian wear and tear could provide an opportunity at some point in the future to facilitate the conversion of the wider path into vehicular access between Alfold Road Estates and Knoll Lane. The view was strongly expressed that future recategorisation of the path as a road for use by cars should be prevented by conditions set at planning approval. An important further concern is that dog walkers should continue to be provided with uninhibited access to the park and dog waste facilities enhanced. The existing plans do not appear to offer electric vehicle charging facilities in sufficient number either, and council members felt that this was an oversight as more emphasis will be placed on encouraging electric vehicles in future. A trustee of the Knoll Park Initiative Trust was present at the Parish Council meeting and was asked to explain and clarify points from the planning documentation. The recreational and natural facilities provided by the park were presented to the council's satisfaction. Some concern, however, was expressed over the long-term financing of the toilet facilities and the business case for the maintenance of the park. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Second speaker, Robert Winkley.
Chairman, committee, thank you for letting me address you this evening. Let us remind ourselves why this park is so important. Parks are good for physical health and well-being. We know for a fact that they're great for mental health too. They help in the fight against obesity, they're good for biodiversity, and they're free. Knoll Park will be created at a cost to the council taxpayer of precisely nothing. So let us not forget that this is a philanthropic act on a scale that you wouldn't dare dream of ordinarily. The proposal before you this evening is a detailed plan to deliver an ecologically based country park as mitigation for homes already under construction. The park already has permission in outline, and this application represents the finer details rather than the principle. So your consideration tonight is not whether or not you want a park in this location or whether such a park is suitable mitigation, but whether the detailed design of the park delivers on the overall vision for the development. In other words, does the scheme you see tonight meet the terms of conditions 1, 16 and 20 of the outline permission? To remind you, condition 1 requires us to make a reserve matters application in respect of layout, scale, appearance and landscaping, and contrary to what the officer presented to you, access is not one of the reserve matters before you this evening. That was dealt with in full in 2017, and our scheme doesn't change it. Condition 16 requires us to demonstrate that there is no raising of ground levels in flood zones 2 and 3, and neither the Environment Agency nor Surrey County Council, as the lead flood authority, have any concerns about compliance with this condition. So the nub of our application really is about compliance with condition 20 and the design of the wildlife lake. And the scheme addresses all of the points in that condition. So does the lake have a sinuous outline? Well, it quite obviously does. Does the lake have shallow margins which grade down to a deeper central area? Yes, it does, and this is shown clearly in the section drawings in the design and access statement. It also has variable bank profiles, water depths, islands and inlets to encourage diverse flora and fauna. The scheme specifies native planting of UK provenance, and we have included details of the surrounding habitat to provide refuge for amphibians and other wildlife. As you'll appreciate, none of this has happened by accident. The scheme is the result of years of hard work, of meetings with the Environment Agency, consultation and advice from Surrey Wildlife Trust and Surrey County Council, and advice from the trustees who are going to take ownership of this park and manage it. It has taken us a year longer to get to this point than we envisaged, and that in itself demonstrates just how much care and attention has gone into this application. The evidence speaks for itself. There are no objections from residents, no objection from the Environment Agency, no objection from Surrey County Council, and no objection from Cranleigh Parish Council. We have the unanimous support of the stakeholders and consultees to deliver a fantastic legacy for Cranleigh. This is almost 23 hectares of land being given away by a private landowner to a publicly accountable trust for the wider public good. The binding legal requirement to deliver this park and to place it in public ownership will ensure that the park is never developed for another use. Chairman, committee, the scheme before you tonight delivers on the promise that the outline permission made. It will become and remain a public park for this and future generations to enjoy. And we urge the committee to give its approval this evening so that we can actually get on and build it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, comments. Councillor Townsend, I think, had a hand up first.
Thank you, Chairman. I just, it's a fantastic opportunity and a great looking design. I have just one question to officer, which has been, officers, which I just thought about actually when the Cranleigh Parish Council representative was talking. As this is EIA development and now they're widening what was the public footpath, does there need to be an assessment at all of that within the EIA rules at all? Does that need to be assessed? Because it was before, it's a different surface and it's a much wider area.
Thank you, Chairman. I think in terms of EIA, the test is a significant environmental impact. I don't think changing the surface of the footpath would constitute one that we would need to revisit the environmental statement.
Yeah, quite happy to be guided on that. I was just thinking, because it had been mentioned. The other thing is I'm quite aware that because this will be a wide area and potentially it will link up with the Orfold Road, is it at all possible to avoid sort of any antisocial behaviour, to condition anti-vehicle barriers at all, which are to be agreed by the countryside team, just to deter any antisocial behaviour that might be encouraged? Because we do have some parking issues within the car park we've got existing on the Bruce Mackenzie field, and I wouldn't want to see any dog walkers or anybody being ploughed down by an over-exuberant person in a vehicle or motorbike. Thank you.
Yes, do you want to comment on that?
Yes, I think the condition would be appropriate, so we could add that on.
Councillor Follows.
Thank you, Chair. I do actually like this scheme a lot. I'm not sure we should qualify it as philanthropic when it's determined by condition from something else. I think that's a little bit of a stretch. A number of us here are also town and parish councillors, and so I think the question regarding the funding ongoing of the toilets and some of the other amenities, unless I've missed that in the report, could officers just let us know where that's coming from and just confirm that it's not Waverley that's going to be responsible for this?
Thank you.
Yes.
The funding is secured in trust from housing on the associated housing scheme, and it would be managed in perpetuity as part of the managed land by the management company. Thank you.
Councillor Adams.
Thank you. Two quick questions. Are there going to be life buoys provided around the lake? And secondly, is there going to be a defibrillator somewhere on the site?
Yes, are these matters we can do at this point?
I think they would possibly come under separate health and safety legislation as opposed to planning considerations. They wouldn't constitute development. Thank you.
Councillor Hess.
I really applaud the people who worked so hard on this. I walked around it on the site visit yesterday, very muddy day. I thought it was a lovely site. All credit to you. Wish we could do things like this in Farnham. But anyway, good luck to you. I think it's a brilliant scheme. However, there is a commission called the Building Better, Building Beautiful Commission, and I'm not happy personally with the design of the toilets. And really, they look very toilet-like. And funnily enough, but, you know, why do they have to be so utilitarian? You know, you're going to have the cost of the concrete footprint and the drainage. It's just the superstructure, and the superstructure could be done in a more appealing way that would fit in, would mellow, and just look appropriate. You know, we've talked about design, we talked about the design of the nursing home, this, that, and the other. Same thing applies to some public toilets. They should really enhance the streetscape and the car park and the entrance to this lovely facility of yours. So that's my only comment. Could that be considered? Thank you.
We have a detailed application in front of us, so essentially the design of the toilets is what it is. I don't think we can do much about that. If you don't like it, you're going to vote against it, I think. Sorry, if you don't like it, you'll have to vote against it. Yes. I understand. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Wilson, if that's what, yes.
Just one possible concern, hopefully it'll be allayed quite quickly. Commercial activity on the site. Have we got anything in place to stop them putting, shall we say, a pop concert on to raise funds?
No, I think it's the answer. I think they expect to put on a pop concert, so...
Yes, they would need a separate entertainment licence for any public things like that, so there would be separate legislation to control that. Thank you.
Yeah, I quite like the idea of pop concerts, but I don't think their neighbours would.
There was a proposal to have a folk festival on the site, which in the end didn't happen, but will come back, so there will definitely be applications for such activities on the site. Okay, sounds like, okay, we reached the end of the comments. Yes, so the recommendation is that subject to conditions 1 to 15 and informatives 1 to 10, permission be granted. So green for... sorry.
And the additional condition.
Which was, remind me, bollards, excuse me, yes. So with that additional condition, please indicate. So green is for, is to approve.
So that's 21 in favour and 1 abstention.
Thank you very much. So item 6.4 we're not going to move to. And is it anything else? That's it. So we're essentially we are adjourning this meeting until a date to be arranged to discuss the Green Lane application. Thank you very much.
Okay.